ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Rishi Sunak delays that crucial fiscal statement amid fears he could abandon the pensions triple lock.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, October the 27th. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
So the Treasury's announced that the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal statement will now be delayed by more than 2 weeks, fuelling concern that Rishi Sunak could abandon the pensions triple lock.
It comes as the Prime Minister uses his first full day in office to begin dismantling Liz Truss's legacy, reinstating the fracking ban that she'd lifted.
The Home Office processed just 4% of asylum applications made by Channel migrants last year. Well, our security editor, Mark White, has an exclusive report on the growing violence between different groups of migrants awaiting their claims.
And small airports across the country, they're beating major ones when it comes to customer satisfaction. Doncaster Sheffield Airport, that's set to close, has topped a Which survey for the 4th year in a row.
So a very good morning. And Andrew, welcome to Breakfast.
Thank you. My first time. So I'm normally just here talking about what's in the papers. So you're going to look after me, Rosie,
I
aren't you?
absolutely will.
Thank you.
And please give your warm welcome to Andrew as well, or your views on any of those stories, the decisions that Rishi Sunak's making. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or drop us a tweet too, @gbnews. A very good morning. Let's kick off with our top story. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has delayed the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal announcement by more than 2 weeks. Now, the Treasury have confirmed it will now be a full autumn statement.
Well, it comes amid speculation the Prime Minister may abandon the pensions triple lock. This is a key Conservative Party manifesto pledge. Also, the pledge to raise benefits in line with inflation is in doubt.
Well, speaking at Prime Minister's questions yesterday, Sunak said he'd be honest about the economy.
That is the difference between him and me. This summer, I was being honest about the difficulties that we were facing. But when he ran for leader, he promised his party he would borrow billions and billions of pounds. I told the truth for the good of the country. He told his party what it wanted to hear. Leadership is not selling fairy tales. It is confronting challenges, and that is the leadership the British people will get from this government.
Well, let's get some more analysis. Joining us now is the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib. Ben, a very good morning to you. Rishi Sunak there promising no fairy tales. What kind of substance did we see from him?
Well, it was a very assured and polished performance, you know, almost sort of Cameron-like, wasn't it? Back to gone was the bluster of Boris Johnson, and in was the smooth intellectual delivery of Rishi Sunak. But in substance, I thought it was a really poor Prime Minister's questions. Keir Starmer had an open goal. Here was a man who actually presided over an accumulation of debt exceeding any previous chancellor in history, a man who locked the economy down, caused the supply chain problems that now have caused the cost of living crisis, and he couldn't land a single punch on Rishi Sunak as a result of that, not to mention his wife's non-dom status, his green card, and then, of course, the fixed penalty notice that he himself had acquired by breaking lockdown laws. So I thought for Rishi Sunak, it was a first-class performance versus Starmer. Starmer, he had an open goal and he failed to slot anything in it.
Ben, were you surprised that he went on the issue of Suella Braverman, whether she should or shouldn't be back in the cabinet, over the fact that she breached the ministerial code last week requiring her to be sacked by Liz Truss? My view, she was sacked by Liz Truss not so much for a technical breach over whether she put a letter out on a private email as opposed to an official government one. She fell out with Liz Truss over immigration.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Andrew. I think that the disagreement between Liz Truss and Suella was one of policy rather than what had happened that morning. Suella was the one who reported herself, and it was a minor breach in the sense that nothing sensitive or, that could move markets or anything had been leaked. She reported herself, it was dealt with, and that should have been the end of it. It can't be the first time that a minister has inadvertently used their private phone. And, when you put that into the context, for example, without wishing to go back to Rishi Sunak, for giving £4.3 billion worth of corona bounce-back loans, the resignation of Lord Agnew in January. What happened between Suella and Liz Truss was minor by comparison.
He raised, didn't he? He used the expression non-doms. The Labour Party are clearly going to try to crack down on how many non-doms we have in Britain. But he didn't mention the fact that Mrs Sunak was exposed for being a non-dom earlier this year. Cue furious reaction from Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, but she then changed her non-dom status, reflecting the fact that the Chancellor of the Exchequer's wife really should be paying tax in Britain on her worldwide income. But Starmer lacked the killer punch.
Yeah, he just lacks the killer punch. I mean, there were so many things he could have had a crack at Rishi Sunak on and really, revealed Rishi Sunak for having been part of the top team that broke the economy, part of a team that broke lockdown laws, who has a wife who's non-domiciled. And, he's making tax policy for British people, but actually his own family is going to be excluded from having to face those taxes. There's so much Starmer could have done. So it was a poor question times from Starmer. But
that Starmer did do was criticise the Conservatives of putting the party first rather than the public. And one thing the public will care deeply about is what's going to happen to their pension. It looked yesterday like we had a hint towards what Rishi Sunak said. There's going to be difficult decisions to come.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things Rishi Sunak said a couple of days ago was that he was going to live by the 2019 manifesto. And in amongst the manifesto pledges is the commitment to the triple lock on state pensions. But it looks like he's moving towards ditching it. He also said during the contest with Liz Truss that he would frack, that fracking would be back on the agenda given the trouble we've had with energy independence. But he's turned his back on that as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how Rishi tries to balance the books over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
You really see a Conservative government, Ben, scrapping the triple lock? They've done it once. Do you really think they're going to do that when you consider the majority of the Tory votes are drawn from people who are in receipt of state pensions? And if the triple lock is scrapped, that means they're not going to necessarily have their pensions uprated in line with more than inflation. I don't think he's going to do it. I think it's a threat. I think it's all a game for Sunak. He'll say he might get rid of it, and then we're all relieved when he keeps it.
Yeah, and that would be quite clever, wouldn't it? Trail it, engender some opposition to it, and then, phew, what a relief, he didn't do it. But he is going to do other unpopular things. This is not a Prime Minister who has bought into the notion that we've got to grow the economy in order to balance the books. This is a Prime Minister who believes in cuts, who believes in taxing people in order to balance the books. And I do think he's fundamentally wrong in that. There has not been a government in history that has balanced their books by cutting costs and by levying taxes. That is a recipe for sitting on growth by constricting the economy. And I think in a couple of years' time, when the election eventually comes, he's going to be in sticky water.
Ben, thank you very much for your time this morning. Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP.
Thank you.
Well, Rishi Sunak also used his first Prime Minister's questions to announce the reinstatement of the fracking ban, as we've just been talking about, that was lifted by his predecessor, Liz Truss.
Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has more on this.
Prime Minister.
A tight squeeze, yes, but the new Prime Minister's first PMQs didn't disappoint, especially for the Greens.
Will he start by reversing the green light she gave to fracking, since it's categorically not been shown to be safe?
We will deliver on all those ambitions. We will deliver on what we said at COP, because we care deeply about passing our children an environment in better state than we found it ourselves.
Have a bed.
The Prime Minister's spokesperson later confirmed that the controversial ban on fracking was indeed back after his predecessor Liz Truss briefly removed it. In Derbyshire, local campaigners had feared the effects if discarded plans to frack near Eckington would return too, according to one Lib Dem councillor.
There was the noise pollution, the light pollution, the traffic movements, the fact that it would be affecting their local environment, and that's why they were against it, and that's why they rallied around to make sure that there was this Eckington Against Fracking group, which have done an amazing job in North East Derbyshire combating fracking.
But not everyone is happy, including the industry reps at UK Onshore Oil and Gas.
This decision is unjustified and unjustifiable. We are going to need natural gas in the UK for decades. If they go ahead and reimpose a moratorium, my question is, where is the natural gas going to come from? And what are the economic, environmental and geopolitical consequences of that decision? This all needs to be seen in that light.
In fracking, highly pressurised water and chemicals are blasted underground, releasing gas. The Tories paused exploration projects in 2019. Years of protests and investigations highlighted the risk of earthquakes around drilling sites like those experienced here in Lancashire. Yet now a global crisis has questioned Britain's energy security. Fracking could help. Campaigners at Just Stop Oil say no matter the necessity, fossil fuels are not the answer.
We have so many solutions to the climate crisis and to the cost of living crisis that we're just not using. It could be insulating homes, subsidising public transport, taxing the big oil polluters.
The prohibition on fracking is technically temporary, and political precedent can change as quickly as Prime Ministers. Will Hollis for GB News in Derbyshire.
Well, let's find out some more on this. Joined in the studio now by energy market specialist Jeremy Nicholson. Jeremy, a big U-turn. It's first Prime Minister's question time. I don't think I'm terribly surprised by it. Are you?
Unfortunately not, as you say. It's always easier for governments to dodge decisions on energy and avoid, confronting some of the activists and so on. There's a lot of hysteria, frankly, about fracking. As has been mentioned, we're already dependent on fracked gas in this country, and the rest of Europe is too. We're just importing it. Wouldn't it be better if we were producing some of it here with a lower carbon footprint and taxing it?
One of the key questions is how much natural gas we actually have to exploit. Do you have any clarity on that?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and the industry has said we're not going to know the answer to that unless we lift the moratorium, allow the industry to find out for itself. It may well be that our commercially viable reserves are quite low, but we won't know that if we don't actually do the test drilling and find out, and that's all the industry has been asking for.
But realistically, if we were to pursue fracking, how many years is it going to take before we get the benefits of the fracked gas?
Well, that's an interesting question. Potentially, it could be quite quick, but really we're talking about 12 to 18 months before we're seeing some gas production from a well, realistically. And to make a significant impact on the market, it would be a matter of years. But as has been mentioned before, we're going to be using gas for decades to come. 25 million buildings in this country use gas for their heating. It's used as an industrial feedstock, and it backs up intermittent renewables in power generation. So however hard that we push for decarbonisation and reducing gas consumption, we're going to be using it and importing it for a long time.
What is the answer to long-term energy security?
Well, it's not putting all your eggs in one basket. So it's having nuclear in the mix as well as renewables, and recognising that fossil fuels are going to be with us for a while until we find something that can provide long-duration backup for when the wind isn't blowing.
So where do you think the Conservatives have not quite got it right?
Well, there is a feeling that the current government is rather risk-averse, I suspect, and some might say rather cowardly on these issues. The previous Labour government dodged the issue about nuclear new build and, to Blair's credit, changed that position later on. I wonder if the Conservatives will regret not pushing for this now.
When I was at the Labour conference and the Tory conference, Labour MPs were coming up to you saying they couldn't believe their luck that fracking was back, because they said a lot of the fracking will take place in key Conservative marginals. And I suspect that's why Rishi Sunak's pulled back. Look at the polls, they're already 35 points behind in the polls. Do they really then want to have fracking, all the upheaval, all the damage it does to the local environment in key Conservative seats?
Well, even if the damage to the environment has been overstated, I think you're right about the politics. And let's face it, if this government really felt it was going to be in office in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, I suspect it might be taking a rather different decision. It's 20 or 30% behind in the polls. It doesn't need the aggro on its home territory at the moment, I think is the swift way of summarising what's going on.
I mean, ultimately, it was a manifesto pledge in 2019, so it was only briefly fracking back on the agenda for the length of Liz Truss's tenure.
Indeed, and one can argue whether she was or wasn't the best person to pursue that particular line. But I think it was right to review it because of the energy security situation we've got in Europe now, which was different at the time the manifesto was produced. And that said, there was wiggle room in the manifesto as well to review the seismic limits on fracking and so on in light of scientific evidence. So there was scope for the government to move there if they'd wanted to do so. Clearly they don't.
Well, how much is the price of gas now coming down on the wholesale markets? We keep reading that it is falling. When will that come into our gas bills?
Well, the good news, as you say, is it's been falling for some months now. The bad news is the price it has fallen too. If you look at the year-ahead market, which is what matters for your and my gas bills and for most businesses, it's still several times what it was 18 months, 2 years ago. So we're going to have to get used to high prices, but they might not be as expensive as feared, and the bailout that the government has put in place for domestic customers might prove to be less expensive. So there's good news on that front, but I think anyone who's expecting cheap energy, unfortunately, we're not going back to what we had a couple of years ago.
Jeremy, thank you very much for your time and your analysis this morning. Jeremy Nicholson, Energy Market Specialist, with us here in the studio. Right now, 16 minutes past 6. A very warm welcome to breakfast. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making headlines today.
Vladimir Putin has overseen annual exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces at a time of heightened tensions with the West over his 8-month-long war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says it's involved ballistic and cruise missiles being launched from the Arctic to Russia's Far East.
Members of the Northern Irish Legislative Assembly are going to return to Stormont today to restore the executive before fresh Assembly elections are called. Now, the special sitting comes just hours ahead of a deadline for calling for another election, and we'll see an attempt to elect a new Speaker. A 6-month legislative timeframe to form an administration expires on Friday. I know it's complex. Our reporter's going to explain it all for us later.
And a new survey shows charities, food banks and local groups are experiencing a drop in donations as the cost of living crisis causes demand to reach unprecedented levels. It shows 2/3 of small voluntary organisations across the country have seen a drop-off in financial donations, 6 in 10 saying they're receiving less food. 1 in 4 places also reporting fewer people able to volunteer.
Now, the number of Albanian migrants making the journey across the Channel to England is increasing exponentially, the Home Affairs Select Committee has heard. Well, GB News can reveal authorities are deeply concerned about the potential for serious disorder and violence between migrant groups. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has this report.
Within this airbase, the main processing centre for Channel migrants, there is, we've been told, a powder keg atmosphere. Many more here than authorities intended, leading to regular outbreaks of violence between residents and assaults on staff. Some of those at Manston Airbase have told us they fear it may only be a matter of time before there is serious disorder here. Concerns backed up by the Independent Chief Inspector of Borders, who visited the base on Monday.
There is of the order of nearly 2,500 people who were being guarded by non-trained detainee custody officers. So they're being guarded by a mixture of immigration enforcement officers and security guards. It was sufficiently alarming. When I discovered that, I was frankly speechless.
The Manston Processing Centre was designed to hold no more than 1,500 people for just a few days at a time. There is double that number here now. Many have been here for weeks. I've been told that on Monday night alone there were 7 separate security incidents here. Adding to the tensions is a change in the demographics of those arriving. Most are Albanians. Few, if any, would ever qualify for asylum. And the vast majority certainly don't want to be here in the first place. It's why we've seen incidents like this at the weekend, where 80 people on 2 boats landed on this beach in Dover and immediately ran off.
A lot of them are not actually interested in seeing their asylum claim through. They just want to get through it as far as they can. We'll typically put them in a hotel for a couple of days and then they'll disappear. They'll work illegally in the UK for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, send the money home, and then they'll go back to Albania.
Sources have told us the Albanian factor is a key driver for much of the increase in tensions at Manston.
I'm afraid this particular cohort does have amongst it more dangerous criminal elements that we have to deal with. It's really important that we have the resources and the time to properly screen them to make sure there aren't any criminals or previous deportees or worse amongst them.
Authorities have confirmed that of the 38,000 who've arrived across the Channel so far this year, 12,000 are Albanian. The Home Office acknowledges it's causing unprecedented strain on the asylum system. It is without doubt the most pressing issue facing the new Home Secretary. Mark White, GB News at Manston Air Base in Kent.
Well, that's a really disturbing report by Mark. Well, I have to say, if the government don't get a grip of this migrant crisis crossing the Channel, they will pay a very, very heavy price at the next election, in my view.
I think it's just some of the figures that are so stark to say just 4% of those claims have been dealt with.
Yeah.
You're left wondering what it is that's causing such a delay and how much damage is being done in the process.
Get those flights to Rwanda, Home Secretary.
You may have a different policy idea.
Yes.
Please do get in touch, of course. You know, look at that argument that was just had recently with Suella Braverman and Liz Truss over what we're going to do about immigration, also who now sits at the helm at the Home Office. What are the solutions? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Because they don't appear to have one at the moment. Now, after the break, small airports are beating major airports. No surprise there for customer satisfaction. So why are they closing? We're going to find out after the weather.
Good morning. Changeable is the theme for our weather over the next few days. Today, no exception. Some showery outbreaks of rain, heavy at times, another breezy day, but it will be very mild for this time of year. Now, the reason we have such changeable conditions, low pressure, firmly in charge of our weather, various weather systems beginning to edge in from the Atlantic, and they will bring increasing amounts of cloud and outbreaks of rain as we head through the day. In fact, already a very wet start across many southern and western areas, and that showery rain gradually moving its way northwards as we head through the rest of today. As I said, there could well be some heavy bursts at times, and maybe even the odd rumble of thunder. And then once that rain begins to clear from the south, we're into a mixture of bright or sunny spells and a scattering of showers. And again, those temperatures well above average for this time of year. With some prolonged sunshine, we could just nudge 20 degrees Celsius somewhere in the south. Now, through this evening and overnight, we'll continue to see 1 or 2 showers cropping up here and there, and then a more persistent band of rain begins to push in from the west. Again, some really heavy downpours associated with this, especially across western parts as we head through the early hours of Friday morning. And yet again, a very mild night. In fact, temperatures by night more like where they should be by day at this time of year, and in some cases, a few degrees above. So as we head through Friday then, that batch of wet weather continuing to push its way north and northeastwards across the country. Still some very heavy downpours, particularly across some western and northern parts of the country. And again, we'll see a clearance behind with fresher conditions and a mixture of bright or sunny spells and still a scattering of showers, and those showers could as well be on the heavy side at times. And this changeable weather continues through the latter part of the week, through the weekend, and in fact into the start of next week as well. But those mild conditions remain with us and staying fairly breezy.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Welcome back to breakfast. It's 6:26, obviously not with Eamonn and Isabel. A very different pairing behind the desk this morning. It's going well so far.
Well, I hope so. Be nice to me, it's my first time.
Lots of people are being nice, actually. Jane in Warwickshire Morning, who says, good luck, Andrew, lovely to see you this morning. Jennifer, delighted to see Andrew on the programme. Please, can we see him more often?
My family are so loyal.
Well, we've got 3 more hours of us here on GB News, and let's just give you a brief glimpse of what's to come on today's programme. At 6:45, as new ONS figures reveal that nearly 39% of tenants are having difficulties affording their rent, we'll take a look at the choice facing buy-to-let landlords.
And at 7:45, from the skinny suit to the designer sliders, we'll ask a menswear stylist if the new Prime Minister is a fashion icon.
And good morning to you if you're listening to us on the radio in particular. New numbers are out this morning. They reveal we are the fastest growing news station in the UK. That is thanks to you at home. Breakfast is the #1 show on GB News Radio. So thank you so much for listening. It really is a pleasure to have you with us. Now, if you've been on holiday this year, particularly abroad, you may have experienced a bit of a hectic time at large airports like Heathrow, which, as you know, has been struggling to cope with demand.
However, if you've travelled, luckily via smaller airports, the experience could have been really different. According to Which's annual survey, Doncaster Sheffield Airport, which sadly is set to close, ranks the highest in customer satisfaction for the 4th year in a row.
Well, let's find out more. Joining us now in the studio is the Times' transport correspondent, Ben Clatworthy. Very good morning to you. So what's this research found? We're getting a better experience if we go smaller.
Exactly. Basically, the big airports have really struggled post-pandemic, staffing, crisis, issues with baggage handling and so on. And actually what we found is these smaller airports, where they haven't laid off as many staff during the COVID lockdowns, have performed way better. The staff are more friendly, the services are better, and actually there's not those hideous queues, particularly that we saw at Easter at Manchester Airport.
We might be happier going through them, but they might not be there to keep servicing us.
Well, Doncaster Sheffield Airport, for the 4th year in a row, the top airport served by the likes of TUI and Jet2, two of the biggest travel companies in the UK, is closing. Its owners say it's just not viable to run it. It's too small to make a proper profit.
What? But if it's so popular, why can't they make it a viable concern?
It's just the size of it is the problem. It's
but can't they
the
expand
overheads. Well, airport expansion is such a hot topic in this country. I mean, it is difficult to just suddenly expand an airport. Bristol Airport, for example, they've been trying to expand over years. The problem is they can't have a second runway there, so actually you're limited in size. But Bristol, not actually at the top or the bottom of this service, but one as well that's suffered this year, just expanded too quickly and therefore not able to meet demand.
I remember flying to Spain from Liverpool Airport, a very curious statue of John Lennon there. Wasn't sure it was John Lennon, apparently it was. And it was great. I got there literally 40 minutes before, straight on the plane. It was terrific.
Oh, well, that's what, you know, when people hear of these stories, that's what everyone wants. No one wants to be sitting around in a departure hall for hours. No one really wants to walk around duty-free with the disgusting smell of the cheap perfume at 5 o'clock in the morning. These small airports do have a real charm. And actually, it's like Belfast City Airport. You can turn up there sort of 20 minutes before you travel. London City always ranks
it's a joy,
highly
London
because
City
it's
Airport.
so easy to get through.
That's my favourite airport. You can fly to Greece, you can fly to all across the continent from City Airport. It's terrific.
But what about the cost? Where's it cheaper to fly from?
The big airports do have an advantage on cost, although Heathrow is the world's most expensive airport, yet actually performs very badly in this survey. Its Terminal 4 is 4th from bottom. However, Heathrow said it was an amateur survey, which is inaccurate and misleading.
Is that right?
Is a default answer for anything that Which do from Heathrow. So, yes, smaller airports do have the disadvantage of being sometimes more expensive. Often you'll get people, I use the example of Bristol, that will travel from the West Country to London in order to take advantage of cheaper flights. But smaller airports, if you go from them, so often it is a smoother experience.
Flying has just become an ordeal if you go from Gatwick or Heathrow or even Stansted now. It used to be a joy. Why have they lost their way so badly, airports?
I think part of the reason is packing in so many flights and so many customers. Ultimately, flying in the UK is turning into a little bit like America, where taking a flight, because the country's so massive, is like taking a bus. Here, we're not so much flying domestically, but it is the experience, basically, of going to a coach station. It's just that it's got some duty-free shopping and a Burger King in it. It's not the experience it used to be. But also, people criticise the way that the airlines have sort of sold themselves down the river. You look at the likes of British Airways, its lounges at Heathrow used to be sort of a really premier experience. Now you're lucky if you can get a seat in some of them because so many people have accumulated points through different schemes to get lounge access.
Ben, thank you very much for taking us through the figures and your perspective on them. Ben Clatworthy, transport correspondent at The Times. Right now it's 6:31. Don't go anywhere. After the break, we'll be going through the papers with Liz Kershaw and John McTurnan.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Welcome back from Rosie and Andrew. Let's bring you up to date. The time is now 6:33.
Rishi Sunak has demoted allies of Liz Truss and rewarded his own supporters as he ploughed on with a ministerial shake-up. There were several junior appointments yesterday evening, with Truss allies and former cabinet attendees Anne-Marie Trevelyan and Chris Philp accepting less prominent government roles. There were also jobs for Sunak loyalists Alex Chalk and Lucy Fraser and Helen Whatley.
Former Tory Chairman Sir Jake Berry has claimed Suella Braverman committed multiple breaches of the ministerial code. It comes as the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak faces a backlash from Labour over reinstating her cabinet role. Miss Braverman left her job in the Truss cabinet after she was caught sending veteran backbench Tory Sir John Hayes an official document from a personal email account.
Away from politics, and health workers are voting today on whether to strike over pay. Around 350,000 members of Unison, working for more than 250 health trusts and boards across England and Wales and Northern Ireland, are being balloted. Well, the union has urged the Prime Minister to increase the rise of £1,400 awarded to health workers in England earlier this summer. Well, it's time to go through the morning's papers. Joining us to do that this morning is broadcaster Liz Kershaw and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan. A very good morning to both of you. Let's start with the big sort of political issues of the day. And we've got the Guardian front page talking about some of the indications from Rishi Sunak yesterday about big changes to come, particularly over fracking.
Yeah, well, fracking probably was the straw that broke the camel's back last week when Liz Truss was unable to be clear about whether there was a confidence vote, not a confidence vote, and was really struggling to get Tory MPs to vote in favour of lifting in the moratorium on fracking. This is smart politics. There's a by-election coming up in West Lancashire, which the Labour Party were going to make into a referendum on fracking. So it's clear he's getting the barnacles off the boat is what it's called in number 10, getting away all of the troublesome issues that are going to be difficult for the government.
Yeah, I'm pretty clear, John. This is nothing to do with net zero. It's nothing to do with green politics. You saw Caroline Lucas, the Green MP, clapping and being thrilled, and I thought it's nothing to do with that. It's because he knows fracking will be taking place in some key Conservative marginals in northern parts of England where they're already under a lot of pressure, the government.
And it makes me wonder how far he's going to go on planning reform, because Tories' seats have been lost in by-elections over planning before Chesham and Amersham, and so maybe we're going to see a toning down of some of the reform agenda, the plan for growth, because of concerns from Tory backbenchers about their future. I think this is all about a strategy of minimising damage to the Tory party at the moment.
But it's not all about appeasing voters, because there's now this big question mark over the triple lock on pensions.
Yeah, this is going to be a new dividing line between the Labour Party and the Tory Party. Labour committed to keeping the triple lock. Tory backbenchers committed to the triple lock. And Jeremy Hunt, I've seen the budgets mentioned in the papers as being, he's got a dullness premium, but it will not be dull if the Tory Party tries to dump the triple lock. It'll be very controversial.
I can't think for a second, Liz, that the Tories would even contemplate seriously getting rid of the triple lock, because that's the only way it guarantees pensioners' pensions increase in line with inflation. We know who votes for the Tories in large numbers: pensioners. And Rishi Sunak knows that.
Yeah.
Jeremy Hunt knows that.
Yeah, they're not all old fogies who vote Tory. But,
well, I vote Tory, and I'm not an old fogey.
Young fogey.
OK.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that.
John, I just have to say, viewers, I am with newspaper review royalty today. When I was a lass and I was watching Sky Papers with you two on a Wednesday night,
right.
I never thought I'd be sitting here. Anyway, that's
the honour is all mine.
That's all you're going to get.
Right.
So, yes, it's a very difficult thing, isn't it, for any government, but especially a sort of reinvented Conservative one. Who do you upset? Because if you were to keep the triple lock on pensions and you were to increase benefits by inflation, that means the non-economically active at both ends of the age scale are getting bumper pay rises and be seen to be helped by the government, while the people in the squeeze middle, they're just about managing, whatever they're called this week. I'm talking about, a couple maybe in their 30s with 2 school kids, holding down jobs, needing cars to get to work. They wouldn't be and they're just in the tax band to pay 20% tax. They wouldn't be getting anything, would they? And they might be a nurse or a fireman or in the public sector, particularly teachers, asking the government, their employer, for a pay rise more than 2%. And they're being told, no, we can't afford it. But we can give people who don't work 10% at either end of the scale. It's, how do you explain that and stay fashionable?
Yeah, I mean, well, they might, John, increase the pensions in line with earnings, which are around 5 to 6%, but inflation has just gone above 10%. So that's going to eat into pensioners' money, which is why I still don't think they're going to scrap it.
No, and look, I think that's the same issue for the universal credit for other benefits, that with inflation at 10%, people are losing the value of what they earn, losing the value of what they get in benefits. And I think that's a big crunch coming because it's a lot of money.
Right, well, let us know what you think this morning. What will Rishi Sunak do to pensions? And has he made the right decision over fracking? You know the email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let's turn our attention to the front page of the Daily Mail, if we can, Liz. And they're dubbing this Rishi's migrant crisis headache. Now, if you're watching the programme earlier, you'll have seen our report on the latest report, which is stark.
Yeah, well, it's everybody's headache, isn't it? But 38,000 people have already crossed the channel this year in small boats. 12,000 are now known to be Albanians, which last time I looked was in continental Europe. Very poor country, but hardly at war or in particular political crisis. In fact, it used to be the poorest country in the world, apart from Haiti, and now it's not anymore. 12,000 Albanian, of which 10,000 are single men. And that, according to the Times report on its front page, is 1 to 2% of the entire adult male population of Albania. So the Albanian government are very much against this migration out of their country, out of their economy, and have actually sent Albanian police, based now in Dover, to interview people and fast-track returns. They want these working men back. Interestingly, the Albanians particularly, it says, both newspapers, aren't coming here for life. They see the opportunities to come here maybe 6 months, a year, earn loads of money compared to what you get in Albania and what it's worth in Albania, send it home and then maybe go back. But the point is, they're not coming to escape brutality or war or famine or starvation.
So they can't be asylum seekers, because what are they claiming asylum from?
A lot of them are claiming asylum from people tracking, what do you call it? Gangs, being exploited by gangs. Well, they're paying the gangs £3,000 in some cases to come over in a boat. But the thing is, when they arrive, they're being sent to Manston, a lot of them, which is an ex-air base in North Kent, and that's now hosting double the capacity it's meant to host. They are all single men of a certain age.
Economic migrants.
It's just unnatural to have so many men. It's not like it's men, women and children with babies and such. It's young, healthy men. Now, they might be going to Manston. They've also got one at Sandgate near Folkestone, which is an ex-army base, which the people who've been put in there are complaining about. It's not nice enough for them. Nearby in Hythe, which is a seaside town, has got a promenade, and I know it personally, and it's got 2 hotels. And one of them is very grand, and it's still operating as a hotel. You could go and stay there tonight. And the other one is much smaller. Can house, I think it's got can house about 50 people, and it's now full of single men who've arrived on boats. So for the local people, this means that the tourist industry is you know, reduced severely.
I think first and foremost they've got to deal with the conditions in this migrant centre. The inspector who went said they were speechless at the conditions that people being kept in. John,
well,
what is the solution?
I'm sorry, but don't dismiss the local people, because the local people never get interviewed. They never get their point of view. And I just want to finish this point, if you don't mind. So now, in this seaside town, you've got 1 of 2 hotels, which is totally unusable for tourism. That means people are not staying there, they're not going to restaurants, they're not going for a chippy tea, they're not going to an amusement arcade, they're not shopping in the high street. Number 2, all these people in the summer were sitting outside on picnic benches.
The question is, Liz, really, is what
security.
The solution is. Let's see.
I'm just
pass it over to John for a second.
OK, nobody wants to know what it's actually like.
We do, Liz, and we've just heard that. And John, what do you think?
The solution is processing in France. It's really simple. If the government weren't in a huge conflict with the European Union, they could do a deal with France and have everybody who wishes to have to be a refugee in the UK apply to the British government, but in France, and then if you don't get in, as many of these Albanian men wouldn't, they can stay in France or go home to Albania.
Well, none of the Albanians.
French police issue.
Well, none of the Albanians should be coming in because they're not fleeing persecution.
No, they're
not fleeing persecution.
The problem that the government's got is processing. They can't process people fast enough. They should
last year they processed 4% of those cases, so something needs to happen.
They either decide quickly and move people, or you move the processing centre and decision centre.
But we're giving France tens of millions of pounds every year. What are they doing with the money? Are they burning it? To the French government to try and stop these boats being set sail, and they're just ignoring it.
No, the French are interdicting a lot of the criminal gangs, and the British police are working with them as far as they can. One of the consequences of Brexit is that we have left the cooperative structures that we used to have with France. That needs to be rebuilt, and one of the issues with the Home Office is that it's failing in its basic duty. It's not stopping the small boats, which are dangerous for the people and which fund the trafficking. And there's a simple solution, which the government won't do because it involves talking to France. Sort the processing and do it in France.
The French have stopped 42% of attempted people crossing this year. It was 50% last year. There is cooperation. There is frustration. When I was in Holland recently, I met the head of border control for Holland, which is a thankless task because apart from the ports and airports, he's got open borders on 3 sides. And he said to me, casually, in a social situation, I really envy the UK being an island. We have a thankless task here. It's not about... They don't bear any grudge towards us because we Brexited, and they're watching what's happening. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight the problems for people actually living on the Kent coast.
I've said before, if the government don't get a grip of this, they will pay a very, very heavy price for this, because Brexit was about getting back control of our borders, and they completely lost the battle here. 4% only applications processed, and when these people arrive on British soil, where do they go? They disappear. They disappear, and the majority, in my view, John, are not asylum seekers because why are they fleeing France? France is a safe European Union country. They're coming to Britain because we're a soft touch.
It's a fundamental issue of government competence. You can take back control all you want. If you can't actually use that control and use it sensibly, there's clearly something very, very wrong in the Home Office. And the revolving door for Home Secretaries, I don't think helps it, but I'm not sure that the incumbents...
What will Labour do differently?
Labour are committed to the processing in France. That's the solution. People don't need to get on a boat. They can be processed and decisions can be made in France.
We've got that special report from our Home Affairs editor, Mark White, so do stick with the programme, we'll bring you that. Let's change tack briefly, if we can, John, and look at the Times front page, talking about a pledge for better education.
Yeah, I think everybody is in favour of better education and better skills and vocational training, and it would contribute in the long run to our productivity. The problem that Rishi Sunak has is for the last 12 years, his government, the Tory government, the one he's been a member of and prominent in, has been cutting funding to schools. Basic funding, the funding that comprised the TAs who give the support for the kids with special needs. In that situation, a headline that said more money for our schools would be positive news. This is just I think it's a great idea. In 20 years' time, it might work, but it needs the money. And all of the other stories in the papers about the mini budget balancing coming up are about cuts.
There was a report yesterday, Liz, from the Sutton Trust pointing out that 2/3 of Sunak's cabinet are privately educated. Is that a problem?
No, I believe in excellence in education, as I do in football.
Oh.
And I think I think grammar schools should be brought back. I mean, if you just treat all children as having the same abilities, all you're going to do is going to be levelling down. And you can't go and play for Manchester United if you're an average kind of footballer just because, oh, you live in the area, so that's your team, you play for them. It doesn't work like that. So I don't see why it should in education. The school I went to private school till I was 11, and then I went to what I dreamt of going to, the girls' grammar school, and just before I went, it changed to a comprehensive school, and it made it a lot harder for kids who wanted to get on, because there was this sort of, lowest common denominator attitude. So I think streaming, definitely, grammar schools, please. I paid for my children to go to private school because I just wanted them to have the advantages.
Finishing there on education. Liz, thank you very much. John, thanks to you too. You'll both be back in the next hour to go through some more, I'm sure, controversial topics. But right now it's 10 to 7. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines today.
Vladimir Putin has overseen annual exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces at a time of heightened tensions with the West over his 8-month-long war in Ukraine. The Kremlin said it involves ballistic and cruise missiles being launched from the Arctic to Russia's Far East.
Crunch talks are taking place in Northern Ireland today in an attempt to avoid another Assembly election. Under the current system, unless a power-sharing executive is formed before Friday the 28th of October, the parties will once again be forced to go to the ballot box. Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary is in Belfast today to meet with the parties. Around 350,000 health workers, including nurses, cleaners and paramedics, will vote today on whether to strike over pay. It's Unison members from more than 250 health trusts across England, Wales and Northern Ireland who are being balloted. The union's calling on the government to top up the £1,400 pay rise given in the summer, saying health workers are leaving for better paid jobs.
Britain's mortgage market meltdown has left many landlords facing a pretty tough choice: raise rents or sell up.
Figures from the ONS this week show that almost 40% of tenants reported inability to pay their rent. But with soaring interest rates and mounting pressure to make financial decisions fast, buy-to-let landlords are debating what to do now. Let's find out more. Christina Caslina is a property investor and joins us from Liverpool. Just explain to us, if you can, the climate, the real impact it's had on landlords and tenants.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say one of the biggest things impacting at the moment is the fact that there's such a shortage of good quality rental homes. So it comes down really to supply and demand issues, and of course when there's a shortage of something, people are willing to pay more. And I've been investing for 8 years, and I haven't ever experienced the rental market the way it is at the moment, where, you know, I've heard time and time again that people are just finding it sometimes almost impossible to even go and view a rental property, let alone actually achieve that. So that on its own, just that small element of it, has been pushing rents up, and that's why we've seen the rental increases that we've seen, where the prices are just going up and up and up and up and up. So that's really impacting, obviously, renters when they're facing a cost of living crisis.
Christina, a lot of people will hear you and hear landlords doing buy-to-let. They won't have a lot of sympathy because they think you're all terribly wealthy and you've got dozens and dozens of properties. But I think the truth is, actually, probably about half of buy-to-let landlords just have one or maybe two properties. They're not these great Rachmanite landlords, rogue landlords.
Yeah, do you know, I think that the problem is property investors and landlords have been demonised for so long that people kind of put it in a box as, oh, well, my landlord. And landlords are normal people. They really are. You know, have so many friends that are landlords, and they are police officers, retired NHS workers. They're normal people that have worked really, really, really hard. They've put their entire life savings into one property, maybe two, and that's their nest egg, that's their pension, because the pension's not as good as they thought it was going to be. And they're just looking for security for themselves and their family. They're looking at interest rates in the banks and going, do you know, this is rubbish. Where can I put my, my small pot of savings? What can I do with it to get that working for me? So I think it's really understanding that landlords, they're just normal people. Their families. I've got a 2-year-old, I've got a 4-year-old, a young family, and I think when you break that down and you start to realise that your landlord is likely, just a normal person, I think it's really important that people realise that, and we're not just greedy landlords and we're not multi-millionaires. It is generally normal people.
So for young people who are struggling to pull together their rents, what advice do you have for them? Because they're getting notice, your rent's going up again, and for many it's just not affordable.
Yeah, I think for the communication is always key for both landlords and for tenants. So if tenants are struggling, then they do need to reach out to the landlord or the letting agent. I would also recommend getting in touch with the council, because there are things that councils can do to help, whether it's top-ups or specific funds that they can help tenants with. I think it's the communication element that's really, really key here. And also that's the same for landlords. If they're now on a variable mortgage and their interest rate has, had that significant rise, which we're talking about, again, ring up your mortgage provider and speak to them, because the last thing a mortgage wants to do is actually repossess. They don't want to make repossessions. So I think communication, do not bury your head in the sand. You have to start speaking about whatever the issue is. Landlords, get onto the phone to the mortgage providers. There are mortgage holidays. Speak to a broker. Is there a better rate out there? I think it is about kind of that open communication, and just trying to keep a level head as well is really, really important.
Christina, thank you very much for speaking to us. Christina Castellina, property expert. Appreciate your analysis this morning. Right now it's 5 minutes to 7. It's going well, Andrew.
I'm still here. They haven't carried me off.
That's true.
Men in white coats haven't arrived for me yet, flapping.
But there's lots more to come. We're going to have more on Rishi Sunak's second day in office after the weather.
Good morning. Changeable is the theme for our weather over the next few days. Today, no exception. Some showery outbreaks of rain, heavy at times, another breezy day, but it will be very mild for this time of year. Now, the reason we have such changeable conditions, low pressure firmly in charge of our weather, various weather systems beginning to edge in from the Atlantic, and they will bring increasing amounts of cloud and outbreaks of rain as we head through the day. In fact, already a very wet start across many southern and western areas, and that showery rain gradually moving its way northwards as we head through the rest of today. As I said, there could well be some heavy bursts at times, and maybe even the odd rumble of thunder. And then once that rain begins to clear from the south, we're into a mixture of bright or sunny spells and a scattering of showers. And again, those temperatures well above average for this time of year. With some prolonged sunshine, we could just nudge 20 degrees Celsius somewhere in the south. Now, through this evening and overnight, we'll continue to see 1 or 2 showers cropping up here and there, and then a more persistent band of rain begins to push in from the west. Again, some really heavy downpours associated with this, especially across western parts as we head through the early hours of Friday morning. And yet again, a very mild night. In fact, temperatures by night more like where they should be by day at this time of year, and in some cases a few degrees above. So as we head through Friday then, that batch of wet weather continuing to push its way north and northeastwards across the country. Still some very heavy downpours, particularly across some western and northern parts of the country. And again, we'll see a clearance behind with fresher conditions and a mixture of bright or sunny spells, and still a scattering of showers, and those showers could as well be on the heavy side at times. And this changeable weather continues through the latter part of the week, through the weekend, and in fact into the start of next week as well. But those mild conditions remain with us and staying fairly breezy.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Rishi Sunak delays his crucial fiscal statement amid fears he could abandon the pensions triple lock.
Well, a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 27th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with some different faces behind the desk. Rosie Wright, myself, and Andrew Pearce for the first time, who's, I think it's been a riot so far.
Hope so.
Lots
Might be the last time, you never know.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Treasury has announced that the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal statement is being delayed by more than 2 weeks. It's fuelling concerns that Rishi Sunak will abandon the pensions triple lock.
Well, it comes as the Prime Minister uses his first full day in office to dismantle what was left of Liz Truss's legacy, reinstating the fracking ban that she'd lifted.
Charities and food banks are experiencing a decline in a drop of donations as the cost of living crisis continues to bite. We're going to find out why one charity in particular in Sheffield is now providing baby food and supplies as parents struggle to cope with the costs of a newborn.
And from the skinny suits to the designer sliders, is our new Prime Minister an unexpected fashion icon? We'll be discussing Sunak's style.
Get in touch in the usual way. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. To our top story, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, well, he's delayed the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal announcement. He's delayed it by more than 2 weeks, with the Treasury confirming it will now be a full autumn statement.
Well, it's come amid speculation that the Prime Minister might abandon the pensions triple lock, a Conservative manifesto pledge, as well as the pledge to raise benefits in line with inflation.
He was speaking in his first Prime Minister's questions yesterday. Sunak said he would be honest about the economy.
That is the difference between him and me. This summer, I was talking. I was being honest about the difficulties that we were facing. But when he ran for leader, he promised his party he would borrow billions and billions of pounds. I told the truth for the good of the country. He told his party what it wanted to hear. Leadership is not selling fairy tales. It is confronting challenges, and that is the leadership the British people will get from this government.
Well, let's go over to Downing Street to find out more. Speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Very good morning to you, Tom. So we started to get a glimpse of those difficult decisions Rishi Sunak said he's going to make, abandoning the pledge on fracking, but also a question mark now over pensions.
Yes, certainly. The Treasury, of course, a parish which Rishi Sunak did run for 2 years, has written up a list, a shopping list, of over 100 different policies that the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, could choose from in order to try and close that pretty sizable black hole in finances. Now, of course, this is a medium-term fiscal statement we're talking about, so this isn't about what will happen over the next 12 months. It's more likely what will happen over the next 5 years and how that fiscal gap may well be closed. However, it's interesting looking at the reasons behind delaying this statement by 17 days until the 17th of next month, rather than the spooky Halloween budget that we had been expecting under the last administration. Not only is this so that Rishi Sunak can put his own stamp on affairs, can make sure that exactly what goes on is something commensurate with his vision as Prime Minister, but also, frankly, the finances may well be in a bit of a better shape 17 days after where originally the statement was meant to happen. Why is that? Well, we have seen over the last 2 days or so, international energy prices have started to fall. And of course, if the government is guaranteeing energy prices for households and businesses across the country, where the international price of energy sits is really, really important in terms of how much money the government has committed to spend. And then there's also the point in terms of interest rates, which have begun to tick down. Indeed, interest rate expectations have been ticking down over the past few days as well. Adding those two changes up, an extra 17 days of delay for this statement could well save the government in the region of £15 billion, which is certainly not to be sniffed at. Now, some people might say, well, this is an argument as to why perhaps you shouldn't rely on long-term forecasts when making 5-year spending plans, but that also fits into everything else. I should just mention exactly what went on at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday, because we did hear some commitments from this government, some commitments that did anger quite a few backbench Conservative MPs, dropping that commitment to allow fracking, shale gas extraction in the United Kingdom in the middle of an energy crisis. To some has raised eyebrows, although Caroline Lucas, the Green MP, was delighted by that, literally applauding Rishi Sunak in the Commons yesterday. Commensurate with that, however, the government looks like it's rolling back on a commitment to allow new wind farms on British soil as well. Now, that's a very curious position, but all of this, it's not so much to do with shoring up the energy position. Clearly, it's less energy generation for the United Kingdom. It's more to do with making sure that votes aren't going on in the House of Commons that the government might lose. This is a slowly, careful strategy from this new government.
Tom, thank you very much, live outside Downing Street for us.
Well, let's get some more analysis from broadcast editor of The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Good morning, Cindy.
Hi, Andrew.
The statement delayed till November the 17th, a clear sign that Rishi Sunak, a former Chancellor, one of his titles as Prime Minister, of course, is First Lord of the Treasury, is flexing his muscles. He's going to go through Jeremy Hunt's prepared statement, line by line, and maybe there's going to be changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I mean, Jeremy Hunt, bearing in mind, was brought in only last week, so has not had much time to do this. The Treasury, of course, the orthodoxy, the civil service, has been making its own plans regardless of the Chancellor. But given this Prime Minister comes from the Treasury, and this is where he cut his teeth, he's going to want to go through it line by line, and he's going to be talking about tax rises, I think, much more than Jeremy Hunt was probably thinking about.
Where are the tax rises going to come, in your view?
Well, we know that this Chancellor, he said... Prime Minister now. He says he's a fiscal conservative. He says he believes in low taxes. But when it came to the windfall tax, when it came to the national insurance hike, he was happy to do those things. So I think he will be trying to look for the ones that are more progressive, by which I mean hurt people, not the most vulnerable people, but are more targeted towards whether it's energy giants or whether it's
banks?
people, working people.
Maybe banks. Let's talk of banks.
Maybe banks. We don't know. Given that he's got 2.5 weeks to go before this, I think we'll hear much more about it.
He can't tax people anymore because we're already facing the biggest tax burden for 70 years.
We're also
and
facing the biggest debt burden, though. I think that's the problem, isn't it? I mean, the COVID pandemic, everything that we've been through in the last few years has just made everything so much worse in terms of tax and spend.
It's a point that Andrew's made earlier, but some of the points he's making, pensions, fracking, to what extent is Rishi Sunak trying to protect the core of the Conservative voters rather than the public at large?
I know, and this is one of the problems. I mean, you see the think tank behind him, Policy Exchange, the centre-right think tank, advising him to drop the triple lock, advising him to go for all these things that, on paper, from think tank world, might sound good and fair and progressive. But as you say, Rosie, you know, the Conservative voters are not going to like that. I think at the moment, yesterday and today, we've seen a bit of a honeymoon period for Rishi Sunak. You see the way he's been cheered on by his backbench MPs at Prime Minister's questions. Let's see how long that lasts when these flashpoints come up.
So what are your predictions for how long he's got?
Well, that all depends on party management. I think the party at the moment has been catalysed into this moment of unity because they've been terrified by the polls, right? I mean, this is historically bad polls for the Conservative Party, so that unites them. They've also brought in, crowned this Prime Minister in order to solve their problems. So if they start bickering now, then they've kind of undone all of their work over the last week. But you do start seeing cracks already. I mean, Jake Berry today has already launched a broadside at Suella Braverman for her reappointment.
He was sacked, of course, from the cabinet.
He was sacked.
He sacked as Tory chairman. Nothing like a bit of revenge.
Yes, exactly. So, of course, maybe the trust campaign, but then there's a lot of Boris Johnson supporters and Penny Mordaunt supporters who are not going to be happy that she hasn't been promoted at all. So I really don't know. I mean, let's just see. Rishi Sunak, you know, I think he is a relatively sensible guy when it comes to fiscal policies and that kind of thing. Let's see how good his party management is as well.
Cindy, thank you very much for your analysis. Hold right there. Let's bring in, if we can, because the biggest problem we've all acknowledged, and so has former Chancellor, now Prime Minister, said is going to be the economy. Well, economics commentator Laurie Laird has joined us in the studio.
Good morning, Rosie.
Laurie, look, it seems as though the markets have stabilised a little bit. It's brought Rishi Sunak a bit of time.
Absolutely, and I think the test of that, the test of how the markets have stabilised, was whether they overreacted to this delay in the statement from the 31st of October to the 17th of November. And thank God they moved it from the 31st of October. What a gift to headline writers.
Completely.
I mean, whose idea was
Halloween.
that in the first place? But the moving of that, the delay of that statement, had the markets not had some confidence in this team of Sunak and Hunt, I think the markets could have overreacted. At the end of the day, after that, we had sterling a little bit higher on the day, no real move in bond yields. That's the market saying, go ahead and delay. We have enough confidence in this top team for the moment that we don't have to get bent out of shape yet. And I think one of the crucial things in this delay, and Tom Harwood touched upon this, I think the reason for this is that the bond markets in particular have settled down. The OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, had said that if the statement were to come out on the 31st of October, we would have looked at bond yields from early to mid-October when they were at historically high levels. This has given the government and given forecasters time to look at falling bond yields, which means that any debt that the government takes on will have to be serviced at a lower rate. I think this is the main reason for this delay.
No.
I lost you there, didn't I? Whenever I talk about bond yields, I can see people
glaze.
Even I've worked out. We want the bond yields to go down, don't we? We don't want them to go up. Yep. Good. Now, the Bank of England next week, won't the bank
They're flying blind now.
That's the point, isn't it? Because they've not got the
point.
benefit of the detailed statement on November the 17th, and they're probably going to put interest rates up next week. Would it have been easier if they'd known what the Chancellor's going to announce?
Absolutely. I mean, they are very much flying blind, and Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, has used those precise words. It may be that the government gives the Bank of England a bit of a steer. They meet on Thursday. They will put interest rates up. No question about that. Inflation at over 10%. they have to be seen to be doing something. Now, the magnitude of that hike is very much an open question. If the government is not going to borrow as much as we thought it would a couple of weeks or months ago, the interest rates may not have to go up as much, but the Bank of England's really flying blind here. One thing that's really interesting and was a little bit underreported last week with all of the other things that were going on, one of the deputy governors of the bank, a guy called Ben Broadbent, did a big speech. It was a hastily arranged speech, and he said, look, interest rates may not go up as high as the market is expecting. And we're seeing this from the Bank of England. We're seeing this from the Federal Reserve in the U.S. Policymakers are saying we need to watch out because we're raising rates, inflation is so high, but there is a lag between when these rate hikes affect the real economy. So as to when we stop raising rates, we're really flying blind here. We're really a bit in the dark. But there is concern about over-raising.
But we're still way below the rate in the United States.
We're absolutely the main rate, and inflation's a little bit higher than it is in the U.S. And we started earlier. We started raising rates a lot earlier. Because America has a lot of its own energy, they're not facing the big energy price rise as we are. So they don't have to do as much to fight inflation.
They can frack. They've got the space.
They've got a bit of space. They have other problems, and we're getting some U.S. growth problems figures today that should shed some light on what's going on. The U.S. economy is actually contracting at the moment. No one is saying recession because employment is pretty strong there. But in raw terms, the U.S. economy is doing more poorly than the U.K. economy at the moment.
Let's just go very briefly to Cindy back if we can. Talking about the US, it looks like Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden had a little bit of an uncomfortable start to their relationship. How important is that going to be? And do you think Biden is really taking us seriously?
I think you mean Rishi Sunak.
Oh, wasn't it? Cringe making. Yeah.
And he tried a few times as well and got it wrong every single time. But I think actually Joe Biden will give him more benefit of the doubt than he gave Liz Truss. People always, we heard behind the scenes that Joe Biden wasn't a massive fan of Liz Truss, not least because of her tough stance on the Northern Ireland Protocol, which Joe Biden counts himself as a kind of honorary Irishman. Rishi Sunak has had a bit of a reputation for being more pragmatic with the Northern Ireland Protocol. He has made the right kind of diplomatic calls in all of these things, whereas often you felt with Liz Truss the approach was just kind of gunning anyone who didn't agree with her down, metaphorically, of course. So I think the relationship between the two men could be quite good because I think Joe Biden will give him much more benefit of the doubt. And obviously, Rishi Sunak knows how to talk to Americans, doesn't he, from his California days?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. They'll meet at the G20. Cindy and Laurie, thank you both very much for bringing out your analysis on the programme. Right now, it is 7:15. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of the day's top stories.
Vladimir Putin has overseen annual exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces at a time of heightened tensions with the West over his 8-month-long war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says it involved ballistic and cruise missiles being launched from the Arctic to Russia's Far East.
Crunch talks are taking place in Northern Ireland today in an attempt to avoid another Assembly election under the current system. Unless power-sharing executive is formed before Friday the 28th of October, the parties will once again be forced to go to the ballot box. The Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris is in Belfast today to meet with the parties.
And a new survey shows charities, food banks and local groups are experiencing a drop in donations. This is as the cost of living crisis causes demand to reach unprecedented levels. It also shows 2/3 of small voluntary organisations across the country have seen a drop in financial donations, 6 in 10 reporting receiving less food.
It's 16 minutes past 7 now. A little later on in the programme, we're going to be speaking to the owner of the Star Inn, who, Andrew, have been hosting ladies' nights for the last 12 years. The Star Inn pubs hosted a weekly night that offered female customers a 50% discount on food and drink. Well, that didn't go down that well with one person who accused the pub of discrimination and said the pub had to choose between ending the night or extending the discount to all. Does that seem fair?
No. What's wrong with ladies' nights? All in favour. As one who's been on a hen weekend, I rather enjoyed it. I was the honorary girl. Gay guys often go on hen weekend.
But what if you went and everyone else got a 50% discount and you didn't?
Look, men rule the world. Why can't ladies have a night where they don't have men pestering them and pouring them in the pub? They can have a bitch about their men and their boyfriends and their lovers. I'm all in favour of it. Well, and I can't. And this is a triumph for wokery. This is wokery.
Sat behind this panel still, who didn't think they were going to be asked to their views on this at all. But Cindy, you're still with us. Is it sexist to say there's a night that just women get a 50% discount?
I think it's quite a feat for free market, for the free market, actually.
Quite right, too.
This is probably a really good PR for the pub, not least because the ladies come, but also presumably you get more customers in general because they want to come meet the ladies.
Would it appeal to you if you thought, oh, there's going to be just majority women?
Yeah, with inflation in the way it is, definitely 50% off meals would be great.
Laurie, what do you think?
Is this even a debate? If someone's going to give me half price off drinks, bring it on. I mean, why are we having this conversation?
So for the financially responsible women, maybe that's the time to go. Let us know what you think about ladies' nights. What should the owner of the Star Inn pub do? They'll be joining us on the programme. On our Twitter poll so far, 71% of you say no, they're not right. We'll reveal the final results later on in the programme. But have
pub
your
in London?
say.
Can I go there?
The pub is in Surrey, not London.
Not far.
But not far. Your views, of course, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and I'm sure we'll enjoy going through those. Now, let's turn our attention to something less silly and definitely more serious. The need for food banks and the increase of them during the cost of living crisis. What's happened is there's been an increasing use of baby banks. They supply struggling parents with cots, prams, nappies and clothing for their newborn children.
Baby Basics UK was founded in Sheffield in 2009 and now has 56 centres across the country. The charity is currently facing its highest referrals and demand for their help has jumped by almost a third, but donations are slowing down.
Well, our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley went to go and find out more.
A package full of essentials is what charity Baby Basics UK supply to struggling families across the nation. Here at the centre in Sheffield, the rise in the cost of living means the need for its services has risen by 28% this year. But the charity is struggling to meet demand.
So across the UK last year we supported 39,000 children and their families, and we're expecting it to be around 45,000 this year. For Sheffield, which is our inaugural and busiest centre, last year we supported just over 10,000 children and families in the city, and we're expecting it to be around 15,000 this year. Referrals come from professionals, but what we hear from our professionals is families are just continually unable to make ends meet, and a lot of the time this may be working families who've got one or both parents in work but still can't make ends meet just because the costs are rising and everybody is fearful about what's coming, including us, about what's coming in the next few months because we're struggling and demand for us is so high right now, and it's only October. What happens when it comes to January and people are having to put their heating on? We're getting often referrals, especially from our family centres in Sheffield, asking for extra blankets for the family so they can snuggle on the sofa with a blanket rather than putting the heating on. So they're the kind of demands that are changing as time moves on.
For CEO Kat Ross, the government needs to be doing more to help support families on low incomes.
In 2022, we should not be having children in a city like Sheffield who are sleeping on a floor or sleeping in a pram or sleeping on a sofa. We shouldn't have parents unable to do a full day's work because they're tired, because they haven't been able to sleep, because they're having to choose to co-sleep with their child, so they're not getting good sleep. They're worrying about how they're going to feed them in the morning. So how can we expect people to hold down jobs in those situations? And I think we have a mental health crisis in this country and not enough investment in our mental health services. And all of this anxiety for parents is detrimental to their mental health. So it's an ongoing issue that impacts every area of society. And I think there needs to be more joined up thinking about how we tackle it as a whole.
With winter approaching, families across Britain are more reliant than ever on charities like this, who are doing the best they can in such unprecedented times. Anna Riley, GB News, Sheffield.
Don't go anywhere. After the break, we're going through all the big stories of the day, including the controversial VAR ruling that denied Harry Kane a goal. Paul Coit will be with us to talk us through the sport next.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to breakfast. It's 25 minutes past 7. Still to come on the programme today. Are skinny suits and cashmere hoodies the key to a chic wardrobe? Who wears those, might we be thinking? Rishi
not
Sunak.
me. Certainly
Well,
not
at
me.
7:45, we're asking a celebrity menswear stylist if the new Prime Minister could become an unexpected fashion icon.
And are ladies' night old-fashioned or even sexist? Please. We'll speak to the owner of a pub whose event came under threat after a complaint from an unhappy customer. A man, of course. Have your say on our Twitter poll at GB News.
And a very good morning. Well, first of all, very good morning to Andrew, who's sitting behind the breakfast bar as a presenter rather than a guest.
First time.
For the first time. It's been a riot, as you can imagine. And particularly a good morning to you if you're listening to us on GB News Radio. So 4 times a year we get listening figures out. The new numbers reveal this morning that we are the fastest growing news station in the UK, and breakfast in particular is the #1 show on GB News Radio. So a huge thank you for sticking with us and for listening and for starting your mornings with us. It truly is a pleasure.
It certainly is. And you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews at GB News UK, or you can tweet at GB News.
a familiar face in the studio with us. Paul Coit is here to talk us through the latest and the greatest sports stories
When
going
it comes
on.
to fashion, by the way, I'll be sports casual. You know, because I've got to. It's the job, so I've got to be sports casual.
And even with a pocket square.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, sporty
Sporty types don't wear ties?
Do they? Is that? Oh, I don't believe that's the case.
Do they not?
Oh, yeah, well, cricket. Oh, yeah, well, higher up. Yeah,
Right,
there's little...
okay.
Yeah, the old school tie is still involved.
Good.
Actually, we were talking about fashion yesterday in the sports in terms of what kind of slogan you put on your football shoe. But let's start with football if we can. Champions League, give us a roundup.
Right, well, as far as my Tottenham Hotspur leanings are concerned, it was a very difficult evening. Very difficult evening. Spurs... playing Sporting Club of Portugal, although better known as Sporting Lisbon, but they like to be known as Sporting Club de Portugal. But anyway, that was the game. Spurs needed to win, and if Spurs won last night, then they would move into the last 16, the knockout phase of the Champions League. Now, Sporting went 1-0 up. 80th minute, then Spurs equalise, and then it's all hell for leather. And then we get literally to the 90th minute, and the great Harry Kane scores a goal. The whole of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium go absolutely crazy and thinking, this is it, we've qualified, everything's great. And then that horrible curse that is VAR. And it was checked, and now this is where... we could go into this, and I could take all day moaning about VAR.
This is the computerised eye.
This is it, and basically lines are drawn across the pitch. They see a screen, and then lines can be drawn to see whether Harry Kane was offside.
Oh.
Now we're talking minute. We're probably talking a toenail, but. The rules are the rules.
That's a horrible vision. I thought you were going to say like a centimetre or something, but we've gone for the measurement of a toenail instead.
That's the way I always work. That's how I got through my maths GCSE, by the way, was by toenails. So, yeah, it's very, very, very slim. So then everybody has to wait, and then there's the decision that it's offside. Now, there's other reasons that maybe it should have been allowed. It involved the ball going back, it involved... I could go into the whole thing. But to cut a long story short...
You're out.
Well, not yet.
Oh.
Not yet. Not yet, Andrew. It should be... it could be OK, but the thing is now Spurs have to go to Marseille, which is just a cauldron of a stadium to go and play there, and Spurs need to win, which was a game that we didn't really want to have to play and thought it would be OK and could go there and it would be a dead rubber. But... as far as the game goes, it's huge. So Spurs aren't out, but very controversial decision and poor Harry Kane. So the very unhappy stadium last night.
Should we move over to the cricket and England?
Yes, we can do. I mean, I don't know if you want to do a little... I should mention Liverpool are through. I should mention Liverpool are through because they won 3-0 at Ajax last night. And also Rangers. Now, it's not very good for Rangers because Rangers actually this could be the worst start to a Champions League ever. So anyway, they lost 3-0 at Napoli. Now, the cricket, that's not so good either. Everything's just doom and gloom, I'm afraid.
Now, just help me here.
Yes.
I didn't know, Paul, that Ireland had a national cricket team. Should I be sent to Coventry, that being half Irish?
Well, yes, I think so. But it's not... it's not the worst thing because Ireland is not known as the greatest cricket nation ever, whereas you've got Owen Morgan, who was the former England cricket captain, Irish. But anyway, they play in the T20 and they beat England yesterday. We talked about it yesterday thinking, oh, yeah, it's looking fine. England would be fine, but then rain came through as a thing called Duckworth-Lewis, which is a method which is like your VAR of cricket, where they have to work out mathematically because the rain stopped play. And England have basically lost to Ireland and now will play Australia tomorrow. They've got New Zealand to play in Pakistan. Mm-hmm. But again, just like Spurs, need to be winning.
Weren't we one of the favourites?
We are one of and we still are. We are one of the favourites. But T20, and it's the same as any cup competition, you've got to get the momentum, you need a little luck, everything needs to go your way, but England aren't playing well enough.
Very quickly, let's look at boxing. Just explain to us what's happened with Conor Benn, because he's voluntarily given up his licence.
Now, this is a really complicated one. He's voluntarily relinquished his licence for now because of misconduct charge, which has come from the Boxing Board of Control. The misconduct charge itself is taking an illegal substance, which is clomiphene, which he's taken, which actually does help testosterone, but is usually taken by women and is a fertility drug. So how a boxer would end up with that, you'd kind of think, well, that smells very fishy. But we're moving on. He's now said that it's absolutely not true, and he's denying it. there's two samples. It's an A sample and a B sample. They're both taken at the same time. The A sample says, yes, it's positive. The B sample, for some reason, is still yet to be tested. So now the hearing continues, and if it's found positive, which he denies, then he could get a ban of 2 to 4 years.
It was going to be an interesting fight, wasn't it? Because he was fighting Chris Eubank Jr.
That's correct.
Both their fathers had an epic fight, 25, 30 years ago?
That's right, Nigel and Chris. And the thing is, it was cancelled right at the last minute. There was lots of rumours, the fact that people knew about this test, but it came out just literally a day before the fight was about to take place. And there was a lot of controversy around it anyway, with Chris saying that his son had to lose a lot of weight for the fight, and that would put him at a disadvantage. So it was one of those things where it wasn't too disappointing for boxing, the fact that the fight didn't happen, but anything involving any illegal substance, of course, is a disaster. So it's a hearing now, and we'll see how that goes.
I can't bear boxing, can you?
I don't have huge opinions on boxing, I have to say.
Really?
I can't bear it. I wouldn't ban it, but I can't bear it.
OK.
I just like the idea of these guys whacking the hell
You
out
know
of each
what?
other.
I completely understand it. I'm a fan of it, but I absolutely understand how people look at it and think, how in this day
and is it sexist to say I hate women boxing even more? Does that make me sexist?
I'll ask you at home that. What do you think? GBViews at gbnews.uk.
It's just
Have you never
awful.
considered boxing yourself then, Andrew? It's
Look
not
at
really
me.
been a sport for
well,
you.
I'd be... What would I be? A featherweight? I'd have to be a featherweight,
Is it
wouldn't
lower
I?
than a featherweight?
Well, that would be me.
I'm going
That would be me.
Killjoy here, but we've got to move on.
Oh, OK.
Paul, thank you very much.
Yeah, Pierce Weight. There you go. Very nice to meet you, Paul.
We've got to go to a short break, but don't go anywhere because a lots more conversation and I'm sure controversy behind this desk in a couple of minutes when Liz Kershaw and John McTernan return to go through the papers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Breakfast on GB News. Time to go through the papers. And joining us this morning again in the studio is broadcaster Liz Kershaw and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan. Where shall we start?
Well, Liz, let's start with you. You've got an interesting story in the Telegraph. Gas tankers waiting off the coast of Europe. What are they waiting for?
Yeah, it's in the bottom corner of this spread, which is the new cabinet. 31 people, 6 women.
Well, it's far...
Yeah,
and by the way, far too many people for a cabinet.
Yeah.
It should be about 20.
And the other thing, that you've got a lovely guy coming on soon to talk about menswear. And they're all in dark suits. Glad to see you're in pink and purple as well. Anyway,
pink to make them wink.
Gas. Yeah, all this argument about fracking, do we frack or not? Apart from the political aspects, with keeping the Tory vote, which we spoke about earlier, it's also a lot to do from campaigners with the net zero policy. And it is the most disingenuous, hypocritical policy we currently have in this country, because we're not saying yet, don't use gas, or we can't use gas to produce electricity. No, we're saying we won't harvest it here and then we can look good. So what do? Well, we have a pipeline from Norway, luckily, in this country, but we'll also import it frozen on tankers from the likes of the United States, where fracking is widespread. And as I say, it's just so dishonest and disingenuous. But at the moment, the situation is that there are 50 tankers queuing up to ports like Felixstowe and Rotterdam, waiting to deliver their gas, and they've decided they'll just bob about in the North Sea because the price, as we saw this week, of gas in Europe, the unit price has gone from €350 down to €100, which is good news. But these tankers are now saying, right, we're not delivering it at the moment because if we wait till December, we'll get £30 million extra per vessel. What a ridiculous situation. In Holland, they're sitting on the biggest gas field in Europe under Groningen. I hope I pronounced that properly. And they won't use it because it's politically unpopular.
It's outrageous,
yeah.
Isn't it?
Let's move on to talk about sports and the upcoming World Cup. Let's go to the Mirror, page 11, John. And Gary Lineker's had some criticism.
Yeah, I think James Cleverly has said that gay fans...
That's the Foreign Secretary.
The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has said that gay football fans who go to Qatar should be respectful of the local Muslim homophobia. And if I was James Cleverly, I'd be really worried by the Metro, which a lot of people read on their way in, saying James Cleverly said, don't be gay at the World Cup. There's something very dodgy about the state of Qatar getting the World Cup. They got it in combination with Russia, the Russian Federation, and the Summer World Cup was moved to winter because there's lots of dodgy things going on. But the idea that you get the World Cup and that then anybody from around the world has to change their behaviour to go to Qatar, it's the wrong way around. And our Foreign Secretary, a British Foreign Secretary, used to stand for British values and for British people being free when they go anywhere.
I get that, but the trouble is, John, if you are gay, like I am, and I wouldn't go to Qatar full stop because it's horrible, no interest, and I don't like football, but if you go to Qatar and you're gay, be careful because they could lock you up. That's the worry.
Yeah, and look, and I
wouldn't want to be locked up in a Qatar jail.
But you know, we used to say proudly, "Civis Britannicus sum." You know, I'm a British citizen, and you don't do those things to me. I'm a British citizen, and it's a bit, you know, it just looks weak for our government to compromise on values, to compromise on rights, and to compromise on our people, because you know, the great thing about modern Britain is it is so tolerant.
Sure.
And it's got people, you know, at every level of life can be open about their sexuality. Except apparently if you're a football fan going to Qatar.
And I remember when Sepp Blatter was head of the FA, the World Football Association, and it went to Qatar, he said, oh, it's all right, gay people don't watch football matches, they don't like football. Outrageous. Some of my mates who are gay love football, but they're not going to Qatar. But they're not going to Qatar. No, there's no gay footballers. We've got no gay footballers in the Premier League.
No,
none of them have been out.
No footballers.
None at all. In all four divisions. It's never going to happen.
No. Can I extend it to women as well? Because there's no way. I mean, the WAGs are being given special advice. There's no way I'd want to go to Qatar.
Yeah.
I've never had any interest in going to many of those Middle Eastern countries. Dubai. No, who wants to go there where you can get locked up for having a snog on the beach in a perfectly heterosexual fashion?
Yes.
So, no, not for me.
Let's look at the Telegraph, if we can, Liz, and a story, it's page 2 of the paper, about grooming gangs, and 2 members of Rochdale grooming gang going to be deported.
Oh, yeah, OK. Special, declaration here. I'm from Rochdale, so this has pained me. And it's not just Rochdale, it's Rotherham and Oxford and places like... Talking of people going to a country and behaving in a manner that's unacceptable to the local population, I'm not tarring everybody in the same way. This is certain Pakistani men who've made their homes in Rochdale and have then taken girls as young as 12, plied them with alcohol and drugs, gang raped them in rooms above takeaway shops, ferried them to different flats in taxis, getting 13-year-old girls pregnant, having sex with 15-year-old girls, picking on very vulnerable girls, white girls in care who didn't have the support of their family.
And part of the problem here, Liz, is the way the authorities turned a blind eye to it. The police and social service, because they didn't want to be seen as racist and they didn't want to take head-on an issue, which is an issue for some Pakistani men.
Yeah, some. In fact, one of these people who's being deported is now playing the race card and saying this whole case against him is just racist. Anyway, Adil Khan and Kari Abdul Rauf are being thrown out of the UK following the gang's convictions for a series of sex crimes against girls in 2012. It's taken 8 years.
Yeah,
I just want to talk about the local people, because I am from Rochdale, and it's caused anger in Rochdale, I know this from first hand, where victims were living alongside their tormentors. People were saying, you know, this poor girl, if she wants to go into town, she might now be 18, 20, she might want to do her shopping. She's likely to bump into one of these guys, or if she orders a taxi. So I really feel for towns like Rochdale that have had to put up with this, and let's hope it's a trend now that people get kicked out. If they've no real legal right to be here, which these two haven't, kick them out.
Quite right, too. John Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, I, for one, am rather pleased she's back in the Cabinet. It rather upset the Labour leader, I thought, wasted most of his questions at Prime Minister's Question Time on Suella Braverman, but the Mail's got a story about a new controversy that she's involved in.
Yeah, the story about the secretive leaks unit within the Cabinet Office who believed but couldn't prove that Suella Braverman was involved in the leak of a quite sensitive story. One that's involving MI5. It feels to me there's the beginning of a drumbeat of other people in the Tory party and civil servants briefing solidly against Suella Braverman. And this may not be the last story that we're going to get, because there's lots of things being discussed around her. But the thing that I'm really interested in is there's a reference in this article to a leak inquiry where these civil servants went to a Cabinet Minister's house and successfully demanded that they hand over their mobile phone. Now, there have been many, many things on that mobile phone, so there are many, many more stories, I'd have thought.
Yeah, and of course, the Labour Party are kicking up a fuss because she came back into the Cabinet just a few days after being sacked from the Cabinet because she had released an email which should have been on an encrypted phone. She did it on a private phone. It was a minor breach, She was really fired from the Cabinet, John, because she fell out with Liz Truss because she wants to crack down big time on immigration, and I'm glad she does, and Truss wanted to have a more relaxed approach.
I think it's nice that we have a Home Secretary who's so is so strongly in favour of the rehabilitation of offenders that she brings herself back into the cabinet after 6 days. But I do think that there seems to have been a pattern of sending confidential documents from her private email to other people who are not in the cabinet.
But they weren't particularly sensitive. It wasn't particularly sensitive information.
Some of this is market-sensitive information. Some of this we don't know the full state of the classification of the documents. You are not meant to send government documents outside the government network. How can your cabinet colleagues trust you to not share cabinet documents if they know you've done this in the past?
Okay.
Let's look to the Telegraph now, if we can, Liz. And Ralph Fiennes has been defending J.K. Rowling.
Here.
Yeah, Voldemort. It's brilliant.
I love Harry Potter.
I love Ralph Fiennes, and I love him as Voldemort. He looks so evil, and yet so sexy in a way. But he's sticking up for J.K. Rowling, he says, and we've all seen it, haven't we, has experienced the most disgusting abuse because of her views on whether people who self-declare as women but still have a penis are actually women. That's basically it. So he stuck up for her. That's one aspect of this story today. The other one, which I find fascinating, when I saw the Queen's funeral, I thought that is just marvellous. All these people who've come out to support British values are normally who might be included in the silent majority, millions of them on the streets. And there are millions of people, apparently, who don't shun J.K. Rowling. In the 12 months up to February 28th this year, Bloomsbury, a publisher, reported 5% increase in the number of books sold. Since then, the increase has jumped to 35% in 6 months. So people, it seems, are saying, stuff it. I'm going to buy Harry Potter books and I'm going to read Harry Potter books.
And quite right, too, because she's been heroic in the way she stood up to the trans lobby, which can be very, very vicious. And I think it's really sad, actually, Liz, that Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, who owe their entire careers to J.K. Rowling, have turned their back on her.
Of course, if you have your own private beliefs and principles, you must express them and be true to them. But talk about disloyalty.
Yeah.
And well done, Rafe.
Yeah, and he was a brilliant Voldemort.
Yeah.
For time, we have to leave it there. Liz, John, thank you very much. They'll be back in the next hour. Right now, it's coming up to 10 minutes to 8. You're with Breakfast on GB News. Let's give you an overview of what else is happening today.
Crunch talks are taking place in Northern Ireland in an attempt to avoid another Assembly election. Under the current system, unless a power-sharing executive is formed before Friday, 28th of October, I think that's tomorrow, the parties will once again be forced to go to the ballot box. The Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, is in Belfast today to meet with the parties.
Around 350,000 health workers, nurses, cleaners, paramedics will vote today on whether to strike over pay. Unison members from more than 250 health trusts across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are being balloted. Well, the union's calling on the government to up the £1,400 pay rise given in the summer, saying health workers are leaving for better paid jobs.
GB News has been told authorities fear a migrant processing centre in Kent could erupt in serious disorder. This is due to the living conditions there. The RAF facility near Ramsgate is reportedly overcrowded, with some migrants spending far longer there than it would normally take to process them. An independent inspector says he was left speechless by the conditions.
Now, this morning, we've been discussing the new Prime Minister's cabinet, his politics, and how he's being viewed on the world stage. One question we haven't yet grappled with, what about Rishi Sunak's style?
Well, let's ask a male celebrity stylist all about that. That's Phil Tarling.
Phil, very good morning to you. So how would you describe Sunak's style, and how much does it actually matter how a Prime Minister presents themselves?
I think he's unbelievably elegant in how he dresses, and his style is so simple and so achievable for, I think, any man.
Financially achievable.
So, OK, let's just say you don't have to buy a bespoke suit to wear a bespoke suit. You don't have to spend a fortune. I know lots of wealthy guys, I'm sure we all know wealthy guys, who don't actually dress very well. He just happens to be somebody who has a history. He's an investment banker, and he knows how to invest.
Boris Johnson looked like a sack of spuds. I mean, he was one of the scruffiest prime ministers I've ever come across. Rishi Sunak is debonair and suave. But help me out about these suits, because they're from Henry Herbert. I've actually seen the label inside. Retail between £2,000 to £3,500. He can afford it. But why are the trouser legs halfway up his leg? What's he trying to do? It's really irritating.
So I understand he's around 5'6", 5'7". So there are skills, there are things you can do with your tailoring to elongate, to make you look taller. This is possibly one of the things. He's also 39, 40.
But it looks silly.
But then some gents like to have a break on their trousers, a break where the hem of your trousers is on the shoe and there's a baggy bit of fabric at the bottom of the shoe. I'm not a fan of that. Some gents like it. So I think how you wear your suit is very personal. He happens to have a great tailor. He happens to have a couple of pound in the bank to make sure that his suits fit very well. But you don't, 750, to be fair, but you don't have to have £750 million in the bank to look $1 million.
Well, let's have a look at Rishi Sunak in a black tie. Obviously, if you're listening on the radio, you can't see it, but I'm sure you can imagine it. One of the criticisms of the Prime Minister is that he's too slick, he's too polished, and that kind of lends to that image, doesn't it?
Well, red carpet, by its very nature, is all about being polished and being honed. I would rather my Prime Minister look like Rishi on a red carpet than I would a Boris Johnson. He does look sharp, he does look polished, but then it is a red carpet look.
But then we've also seen him in a hoodie, in much more loungewear as well. I think we can get a picture of that up. We don't normally see politicians at home in that much more dressed down way. Why do you think he's gone for this at times?
I think dressed down is really difficult for gents to wear. Most gents understand how to wear a suit. In their day-to-day, gents generally wear suits, but that smart casual, that dressed down thing is very difficult to do. And I think in an office, he throws on his hoodie. Maybe he hasn't got air conditioning in his office. Maybe it's the equivalent of somebody throwing on a pashmina in their office. I don't know. But a hoodie is definitely a very relaxed way and an informal way to dress.
Would you wear a hoodie at work?
No.
Would you wear a slider?
I don't really remember what a slider is. Remind me what a slider is.
So a slider is footwear.
Right.
Created by Adidas, I think. And it just has a front bit. Not too dissimilar to a flip-flop. That's a thong. A slider just has a bar.
I'm sure we can see a picture of it. Look, you can see just at the bottom there, underneath the table.
Oh, they're awful.
Socks
and he's got
sliders.
socks under them, but that's not right, is it?
And how much do those
white
cost?
socks?
An Adidas slider or a slider would retail £30, £40, £50. I'm not 100% sure, but they are incredibly fashionable. All the millennials are wearing them. I mean, if the millennials are wearing them...
He's 42.
He's 42. Is he 39 or 42?
No, he's 42.
He's 42. I don't think... I'm personally not a fan. I'm not impressed by sliders, but they're incredibly practical. They're all over the catwalk. Glossy mags are making them. Highbrow designers are making them. Everybody's making a slider, and a lot of people are wearing them.
What about those Prada shoes he wore on a building site in Teesside, which retailed at £495? Ruined by walking on a building site with the mayor of Teesside, Ben Houchen. I mean, that was a misstep, if you pardon the pun.
A misstep as far as wearing suede on a working site. That is an oversight. But let's have a look at cost per wear. We invest in our clothes. The cost per wear, your suit, if your suit is £300 or £3,000, if your suit was £300 and you wear it 300 times, your suit is effectively a pound. So with his shoes, how often does he wear his shoes? Maybe he wears his Prada loafers every single day, in which case the cost per wear comes down an awful lot.
What should men pay for a suit? That's what I want to know. What should be... I mean, how much do you pay for your suit?
My suit is about £500.
OK.
It's not
made to measure?
It's not made to measure, but it's been tailored, and that's the point. It's not how much you spend on a suit. I always coach my clients that you have money for a suit and you have money in the pot for alterations, because the difference between good and great is alterations.
Phil, thank you very much.
Looks very smart, doesn't
he? Does. I just want to ask you very quickly, you know, Rishi Sunak needs to appeal to the public at large. He needs to look smart, but how much does his image have an impact on how he can do that?
Well, you know that the Labour Party will play very heavily on the fact he's fabulously wealthy, the first MP to ever appear in the rich list, number 220 with his wife, because she's worth 730 million. I think he has to be careful of it, because if he's if he's always wearing £3,500 suits, too flashy, particularly if he's going to put taxes up, and people think, how will he be able to relate? So I'm not saying he should go into sackcloth and ashes, but I think he's got to be wary.
Bill,
your suit, by the
thank
way.
you very much. After the break, we're going to have much more, less on the Prime Minister's wardrobe, but his change of direction from Liz Truss. Don't miss it.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Rishi Sunak delays his crucial fiscal statement amid fears he could abandon the pensions triple lock.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Thursday, the 27th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Rosie Wright and Andrew Pearce. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Treasury's announced that the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal statement will now be delayed by more than 2 weeks, fueling concern that Rishi Sunak could abandon the pensions triple lock.
It comes as the Prime Minister uses his first full day in office to begin dismantling Liz Truss's legacy. Remember her? Reinstating the fracking ban, for instance, that she lifted.
The Home Office processed just 4% of asylum applications made by Channel migrants last year. Well, our security editor, Mark White, has an exclusive report on the growing violence between different groups of migrants who are awaiting their claims.
And is the end in sight for Ladies' Night? We're going to meet one pub landlord who's had to cancel his female-skewed event after a complaint from a customer, who was a man, of course.
Lots of you getting in touch on Ladies' Nights, actually. A very good morning to Tom, who says this pub is actually banning men from their local. Julia says, if men don't like Ladies' Night, why don't they just self-identify as a woman? Your views coming in, please. gbviews@gbnews.uk, particularly on the decisions made by the new Prime Minister. Well, let's go to our top story. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has delayed the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal announcement by more than 2 weeks. The Treasury have confirmed there will now be a full autumn statement.
It comes amid speculation the Prime Minister might actually abandon the pensions triple lock, which is a Conservative manifesto pledge, as well as the pledge to raise benefits in line with inflation.
Well, speaking at Prime Minister's questions yesterday, Sunak said he'd be honest about the economy.
That is the difference between him and me. This summer, I was being honest about the difficulties that we were facing. But when he ran for leader, he promised his party he would borrow billions and billions of pounds. I told the truth for the good of the country. He told his party what it wanted to hear. Leadership is not selling fairy tales. It is confronting challenges, and that is the leadership the British people will get from this government.
Well, let's cross over to Downing Street and speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Good morning, Tom. What did you learn mainly from that first Prime Minister's questions?
Yes, it was a much more bolshy affair than many people were expecting. There had been criticism of Rishi Sunak and indeed Keir Starmer in the days and weeks leading up to this clash, this meeting of minds, that both are pretty boring individuals, pretty centrist individuals, pretty similar individuals in so many ways, pitching for that centre ground as they both are. And yet, it really was quite a testy exchange. Some of the loudest roars from the Conservative backbenchers than we have seen for a long time. And also the Labour leader getting in some barbs there about the non-dom status of Rishi Sunak's wife in the past. Now, looking at this exchange in the round, I think it's fairly fair to call it a fairly scored draw. The lines that Rishi Sunak came out with, we just heard one of them about sort of his truth-telling mission to the British public, about how none of this is going to be easy, about how we've been emerging from a global pandemic and indeed war in Europe, and that means tough decisions are coming. That is surprisingly something that has landed fairly well. It fits in with his sort of serious, grown-up image he's trying to present. However, some of those difficult choices will soon come to bear, of course, and the Treasury has drawn up a shopping list of various areas where money could be saved, and none of them are particularly politically easy. Of course, one of them we understand is this idea that the triple lock on pensions could perhaps move to a double lock on pensions, ensuring pensions still rise, but instead of by 3 measures, by 2 measures. That might be a medium-term solution to try and spend less money. Indeed, there are other options, of course. Rishi Sunak hasn't been known to shy away too much from tax rises in the past. Might we see further threshold freezes of tax levels too? That would hit working people. It would be a tough political sell, although clearly there are tough times ahead. These are all the different options that the Chancellor and Prime Minister will have to make over this delayed fiscal statement, although one chink of light, perhaps, is that this 17-day delay from the 31st of October to the 17th of November may give a bit more fiscal breathing space. Why? We've seen that energy prices around the world have started to tick down. We've seen that interest rate expectations may come down too, which might mean that there's £15 billion fewer spending cuts than were thought just a few days ago. Potentially, this delay could save a lot of money.
Tom Harwood, thank you very much, our political correspondent outside Downing Street for us. Well, let's get some more analysis now from the broadcast editor at The Spectator, Cindy Yu. Cindy, welcome back into the studio. How do you think that Rishi Sunak fared the first time head-to-head against Keir Starmer?
I think, like Tom, I was also surprised by how bolshy he was. He was positively bouncing on the dispatch boxes, whereas before he had always projected this very serious, very grown-up image. He was happy to get his hands dirty in Prime Minister's questions, which is meant to be this back and forth, getting his backbenchers kind of riled up. And for the first time in maybe a year, you can see Conservative MPs actually being quite excited. The troops were rallied. And I thought it was as well as it possibly could have gone. And Keir Starmer obviously tried to attack him on various things like his wife's non-dom status, on his Suella Braverman, on his past comments about deprived areas and redistribution. But he had answers to all of those things because these are long-standing attack lines.
I thought he got it completely wrong, Starmer, in his first question on about Suella Braverman and some row about did she or didn't she send an unencrypted email, when he should have gone for the fact this guy's become Prime Minister. He's presided over the biggest tax burden this country's faced in 70 years and probably going to make it even worse. Shouldn't that have been his attack line?
Well, I guess it's difficult for Labour because what would Labour do?
But they're in opposition. They'll say, it doesn't matter what we do. I mean, they're just relying on the Tories to screw up.
That's true. It hasn't stopped them from advocating for the energy package, as well as the pensions triple lock, as well as all of these things without really saying how they're going to pay for it. Of course, that is the prerogative of the opposition party. But I think Starmer using 3 questions, he only gets 6 on Suella Braverman. Come on, move on.
Yeah.
There were better things. Once Rishi Sunak had that line about how she apologised, she's now come back, she's recognised the mistake she's made. There's not much else you can tackle with that one.
The Conservative Party certainly want to move on from that. What they can't move away from is the awkward conversations or difficult decisions, as Sunak said, that are going to have to come in terms of dealing with that huge black hole. We got a glimpse of what that might look like yesterday and a big question mark over pensions.
Yeah, and that's an almighty row that Rishi Sunak is going to be facing, probably his first big row, and I don't even know if he'll have the political capital to get this kind of thing through. Now, I think there is a world in which, and Andrew, correct me if you disagree, but I think there's a world in which you can argue that the whole country has to rally together, that you have a double lock, that instead of rising by inflation, which is 10%, is a lot, you increase by average wages, because that is what people in general, the whole country is having to deal with. Otherwise, the burden will be only falling on working peoples. So if you can kind of enlist that kind of wartime spirit, perhaps there's a political argument to be made for it, but even that would be difficult.
But I mean, pensions, the triple lock was dismantled last time with the pledge that it would be brought back. Politically, it's going to be a very hard sell, and some pensioners really are on the edge.
Of course.
And if they go up in line with wages, they're not going to be able to manage.
Yeah, of course. That is a difficult problem, isn't it? I think Rishi Sunak will be talking more about targeted support as well, so other ways in which those pensioners can be helped.
Why doesn't he go for another windfall tax? There's talk in the ether of the banks. Now, Mrs Thatcher, nobody would call her a great taxer. She brought in a windfall tax on the banks in the 1980s. They're making vast profits, Cindy.
Yeah, I don't think... so because of the rates rises, basically, they're making vast profits. And the HSBC, NatWest, all of these banks have announced that. I don't think Rishi Sunak would shy away from that, given how he brought in a windfall tax on energy companies because of their extraordinary profits during this extraordinary time. If this kind of one-off windfall tax would work and would really transpire into billions of tax revenues, I think Rishi Sunak, ideologically speaking, wouldn't be opposed to that.
And it would spike Labour's guns too.
Yeah.
Because they've not come forward to that.
But then obviously all of these tax rises are hard because in 2 years' time, if Labour comes in, or whatever general election we have, how can Rishi Sunak attack them for higher taxes when he's the Chancellor and the Prime Minister who's brought in so many?
It's a big question. Cindy, thank you very much for coming in. Really appreciate your time this morning. Broadcast editor at The Spectator.
Now, crunch talks are taking place in Northern Ireland today. It's in an attempt to avoid yet another Assembly election.
Well, under the current system, unless a power-sharing executive is formed before Friday the 28th of October, the parties will once again be forced to go to the ballot box.
So let's cross over to Belfast now, where our Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie has more.
Well, good morning and welcome to Stormont. In fact, if you listen quite closely, you could nearly hear Sonny and Cher playing, because this is Groundhog Day. It is like the pub with no beer. It's a Parliament buildings with no government. To explain this, and it could take hours to explain it to anybody, but we'll quite quickly try to go through it. Behind me is government buildings. The Northern Ireland Assembly sits there. Down the road is the castle, and the executive sit there. The executive are chosen from the Assembly above, and the ministers in the executive, it's like a cabinet if you like, are picked by how many departments they get, by how big their parties were getting in to the Assembly behind us. Committees examine legislation that goes forward before it goes forward to the executive, and then becomes law and moved into Northern Ireland. Under the Good Friday Agreement, this system was set up that certain locks were put in place. The first of those, of course, was John Major, and his Irish counterpart at that time had to sign an agreement saying that both parties had no financial, selfish or strategic interest in Northern Ireland. The Brexit has made that not true. The Irish Republic, of course, is part of the EU. They're trying to protect the single market, and the protocol was put into place. The DUP then collapsed the government here back in February. Paul Givan, the First Minister, withdrawing his support for the government and effectively leaving a zombie government in place. So legislation was put through the House of Commons in London, because this isn't uncommon in Northern Ireland. In 2017, the Assembly elections then, Sinn Féin, the largest nationalist party, stayed out of this place behind us for 1,044 days. Then Julian Smith, the Secretary of State, put forward this legislation. It came through the House to stop that happening. So when we have an election, the ministers are held in place for 24 weeks from the first time they try to have to form a government. That runs out tomorrow. Well, at midnight tonight, actually. And now Chris Heaton-Harris must decide if he's going to call an election. But what happens if he does that? Well, the protocol is still in place. Unionists here, not one unionist side, supports the protocol, and that undermines the Good Friday Agreement. Tony Blair, the architect of the Good Friday Agreement, or one of the main ones, has said himself that the protocol and the Good Friday Agreement cannot exist in the same space, because Article 6, the acts of the Union, are changed by the protocol. The money side, the commercial side of Northern Ireland, has been annexed by the EU. And the DUP or any unionist will not sit in government where that is taking place. So if an election is held this side of Christmas, which is looking very likely, Sinn Féin will turn it into a border poll, the DUP will challenge that, and we will end up with two massive opposites coming back into power. The middle ground will be squeezed, and the Good Friday Agreement will definitely be done at that stage.
Doogie, thank you very much for speaking to us live there from Stormont. Of course, we'll bring you the developments as and when they happen. Right now, it is 8:15. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of the day's top stories.
Vladimir Putin has overseen annual exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces at a time of heightened tensions with the West over his 8-month-long war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says it's involved in ballistic and cruise missiles being launched from the Arctic to Russia's Far East.
A new survey shows charities, food banks and local groups are experiencing a drop in donations as the cost of living crisis causes demand to reach unprecedented levels. It shows 2/3 of small voluntary organisations across the UK have seen a drop-off in financial donations. 6 in 10 reported receiving less food. Also, 1 in 4 reported fewer people being able to volunteer.
And around 350,000 health workers, they include nurses, cleaners and paramedics, are voting today on whether to strike over pay. Unison members from more than 250 health trusts across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are being balloted. The union is calling on the government to up the £1,400 pay rise given in the summer, saying health workers are leaving for better paid jobs.
Now, Now, the number of Albanian migrants making the journey across the Channel to England is increasing exponentially. That's the conclusion of the Home Affairs Select Committee. That's what they heard.
Now GB News can reveal that the authorities are deeply concerned about the potential for serious disorder at a migrant processing centre in Kent. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this disturbing report.
Within this air base, the main processing centre for Channel migrants, there is, we've been told, a powder keg atmosphere. Many more here than authorities intended, leading to regular outbreaks of violence between residents and assaults on staff. Some of those at Manston Air Base have told us they fear it may only be a matter of time before there is serious disorder here. Concerns backed up by the Independent Chief Inspector of Borders, who visited the base on Monday.
There is of the order of nearly 2,500 people who were being guarded by non-trained detainee custody officers. So they're being guarded by a mixture of immigration enforcement officers and security guards. It was sufficiently alarming when I discovered that. I was frankly speechless.
The Manston Processing Centre was designed to hold no more than 1,500 people for just a few days at a time. There is double that number here now. Many have been here for weeks. I've been told that on Monday night alone there were 7 separate security incidents here. Adding to the tensions is a change in the demographics of those arriving. Most are Albanians. Few, if any, would ever qualify for asylum. And the vast majority certainly don't want to be here in the first place. It's why we've seen incidents like this at the weekend, where 80 people on 2 boats landed on this beach in Dover and immediately ran off.
A lot of them are not actually interested in seeing their asylum claim through. They just want to get through it as far as they can. We'll typically put them in a hotel for a couple of days and then they'll disappear. They'll work illegally in the UK for maybe 6 months, maybe a year, send the money home and then they'll go back to Albania.
Sources have told us the Albanian factor is a key driver for much of the increase in tensions at Manston.
I'm afraid this particular cohort does have amongst it more dangerous criminal elements that we have to deal with. It's really important that we have the resources and the time to properly screen them to make sure there aren't any criminals or previous deportees or worse amongst them.
Authorities have confirmed that of the 38,000 who've arrived across the Channel so far this year, 12,000 are Albanian. The Home Office acknowledges it's causing unprecedented strain on the asylum system. It is without doubt the most pressing issue facing the new Home Secretary. Mark White, GB News at Manston Air Base in Kent.
It's generated an awful lot of discussion. A very good morning to Lorraine, who says, issue ID cards to all that are entitled. That will sort out a lot of the problems of immigration. And Michaela in Essex has a different perspective, saying, I feel now the only way to stop illegals/refugees heading to the UK is to change the benefit system so they don't receive housing benefits, the NHS, ahead of British citizens.
And Jay makes an interesting point. She says Albania is not in the EU. Why are Albanians being allowed through the EU borders to get to France and then the UK? Another thing about Albania, of course, Rosie, there's no war in Albania. What are they fleeing from? They're not fleeing seeking asylum because Albania is a country at peace. It's a poor country, but that's not the point of the asylum system. And Colin says one of the main problems with the immigration issue is solicitors putting in appeal after appeal once an asylum application has been refused. And they do very well out of it, on legal aid, of course.
It's front page of many of the papers this morning, some of them saying this is going to be Sunak's greatest headache. How do you solve this problem? Clearly, it's not safe for the people who are in that facility that Mark White's just been at. Many people will say, why is it that just 4% of those claims were processed in the last year? That's clearly so far from insufficient. Please contribute to the conversation. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right now, it's 20 minutes past 8. Lots to come.
And after the break, we're going to be taking a look at a touching tribute to the armed forces at the launch of the Royal British Legion's Poppy Appeal.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back, 25 minutes past 8. You're with Andrew and Rosie on breakfast this morning. We've got an hour to go, Andrew.
Yeah. They haven't taken me away yet. Yes, I'm enjoying it so far. Most important, I hope people watching are enjoying.
I'm sure there were lots of actually really nice comments. You can't read any of these out, but I can. Jennifer, very good morning, says, delighted to see Andrew on the programme. Please can we see him more often? Anne says, great to see Andrew today. When does his own programme start, please?
It starts a week tomorrow at 12 o'clock.
So this is like your dress rehearsal?
It is, it's a dress rehearsal, and I'm really enjoying it, and it's very good of my relatives to email in if I requested.
Well, there's an hour left of breakfast still to come on the programme just after 9 o'clock. Don't miss this. We're going to be speaking to the Conservative chairman, Nadhim Zahawi, if the new Prime Minister will stick to the manifesto pledge committing to the triple lock on pensions. I'm pretty sure you're going to want to hear his answer.
Indeed. And at 9:15, former international Welsh rugby player Gareth Thomas, he's going to be here telling us about his campaign to raise awareness about HIV, and we'll also get his thoughts on Qatar hosting the World Cup.
And a really good morning to you if you're listening to us on the radio. Of course, we're on your TV and radio. 4 times a year, we get figures on how the entire radio industry get figures on how many people are listening New numbers out this morning reveal that we, GB News Radio, are the fastest growing news station in the UK, and Breakfast is the #1 show on GB News Radio. So a huge thank you to you for listening, for watching, to contributing. Please continue to do so. And as ever, we really want you to be involved in the conversation.
Indeed, and you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet @GBNews.
The Royal British Legion is launching its 2022 Poppy Appeal this morning.
The campaign has raised hundreds of millions of pounds for serving and former members of the armed forces and their families since the end of the First World War.
Well, our national reporter Paul Hawkins has more. Paul, a very good morning.
Yeah, morning, Rosie. Yeah, the Royal British Legion launching its appeal this year, which will run through until Remembrance Sunday on November the 13th this year. And this is part of the launch today, this huge wall covered in poppies, and these circles representing a story, the story of a family, of someone who's been lost in conflict, and kind of how the Royal British Legion has helped them. And the poppies cover up the story, and then when you take off a poppy, it uncovers the story. So here we have the story of Imogen, whose dad is the regimental corporal major of the Household Cavalry Regiment. So that's kind of how they're launching the Poppy Appeal this year. Let's get more information now from Andy, who's from the Royal British Legion. Andy, really good to talk to you. First of all, just tell us very quickly, what does the Royal British Legion do? When we put our money in the tin and we take a poppy, where does it go?
Well, we help veterans, obviously, from both world wars, but also veterans today, our whole armed forces community, the family members who need our help. And it's very poignant this year because we've also increased our demand for requests for support because of cost of living. So we're helping veterans who are in trouble right now, but also, it also goes on to the historical veterans who fought in wars. And we really want people this year to be wearing their poppy and just kind of showing that they care for that community, because they've done some astonishing things for us and a fabric of our society.
Yeah, and I mean, are you worried that people may not be able to dip into their pockets as much as they would do in other times?
We're incredibly respectful. Everyone's kind of tight budgets at the moment, but every penny that goes in, every swipe of the contactless machine on the appeal this year is going directly to help veterans who are in need right now, past and present. So wearing your poppy really kind of shows you care for that armed forces community. Many people that we've never met. And today's astonishing because we're hearing the live stories of people who've been in trouble, and the Royal British Legion has helped.
Yeah, well, let's speak to one of those now, Chantel Wynne. Chantel, just first of all, tell us about your husband, Ryan.
So Ryan was in the TA and he got called up to go to Afghanistan in 2006. Before Ryan went to Afghanistan, he was easygoing, placid, everything just went over his head, family man, enjoyed going out with the family. And then when Ryan he come back in the November, so all the fireworks were going off, so he'd be hiding under tables. He was more jumpy because he felt like he was back on the war zone. After a while, Ryan seemed to hit a brick wall. And he wouldn't go out anywhere. He stopped in the house. We'd go out walking at 2-3 o'clock in the morning because the walls were closing in on him. And on the 10th of November 2015, Ryan had committed suicide. Me and my eldest daughter, Rosie, found Ryan hanging.
I mean, an incredibly difficult time then and still for you and your family.
Yeah, our world was ripped upside down. Didn't know where to turn, hadn't got a clue. So someone mentioned speaking to the Royal British Legion. Me being naive, thought the Royal British Legion was for the elder generation and not for us as a younger generation. It's totally wrong. I phoned the British Legion. They come out to me. They was that shoulder to cry on. They helped me fill out forms because of all the forms that you have to fill out. They bought the kids a Christmas present because Ryan died in the November, so they knew that I didn't want to go out Christmas shopping. They bought food hampers for us. They took us on our first holiday just to regroup as a family again and just reconnect. They're amazing.
And tell us a little bit, you've told us a bit about the effect that Afghanistan had on Ryan. Tell us about what he was like before that.
Ryan was just a real family man. We did everything together. I started going out with Ryan when I was 16 years old, so, we were young sweethearts, so it was just a normal family, just doing the things that we all loved together. Yeah. And then when he come back, that started to dwindle, and it was mum taking Daisy to football and mum doing everything because Ryan just couldn't cope with the outside world.
Yeah. And how are you and the kids now?
We're really good. We've got the support from the Royal British Legion and family, so we're really good. We got, I wanted the kids down that right track and get them on the right road, which the Royal British Legion helped us with. And we've got them on that support, and Rosie's at university and Daisy's studying A-levels, so we're on a good path.
And important to remember those who served in conflict like Ryan.
Yeah, definitely. Remembrance Day to me is not just remembering those that we've lost, but also the sacrifices of all the men and women that have gone out there, and lost limbs, mentally, psychology, just everything. Just, they've missed the families for months. Yeah. And simple things like, I'd got 2 young kids at home. I needed a pint of milk. You can't just go to the shop and get a pint of milk because you've got 2 young kids.
Yeah.
So the families just are put under, they do so much for us.
Think about the families as much as those who are serving.
Yeah, definitely.
Chantal, thank you for speaking to us.
Thank
you as well, Andy. So, the poppy appeal running through until November the 13th, and the messages go out. And when you put that money in the tin and you buy that poppy, remember where the money's going. Remember not just those who are serving and who have served, but also the families as well.
Paul, thank you very much. Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter. Right now, it's 8:33. Do stay with us. After the break, we're going to be going through the papers again with John McTernan and Liz Kershaw.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to the programme. Let's bring you up to date with the day's top stories.
Former Tory chairman Sir Jake Berry has claimed Suella Braverman committed multiple breaches of the ministerial code. It comes as the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak faces a backlash over reinstating a cabinet role. The Home Secretary left her job in Liz Truss's cabinet after she was caught sending veteran backbench Tory Sir John Hayes an official document from a personal email account.
Crunch talks are taking place in Northern Ireland today in an attempt to avoid another Assembly election. Now, under the current system, unless the power-sharing executive is formed before Friday the 28th of October, the parties will once again be forced to go to the ballot box.
And health workers are voting today on whether to strike over pay. Around 350,000 members of Unison, working for more than 250 health trusts and boards across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, are being balloted. It comes as Unison urged the Prime Minister to increase the rise of £1,400 awarded to health workers in England earlier in the summer.
Well, it's time to go through the papers again this morning. Joining us in the studio is broadcaster Liz Kershaw and former advisor to Tony Blair, John McTernan. A very good morning to both of you. John, let's start with you if we can and head to the Telegraph. And Boris eyes the world stage. In what capacity?
I think probably in his capacity as Boris, but the story is about setting up a foundation to raise money for the reconstruction of Ukraine, which is critical. It will cost trillions of dollars to rebuild Ukraine after the damage done by Russia. Boris has got a more modest amount in mind. He's saying he might, well, his friends of Boris are saying his foundation might raise millions. So I think it's a way to associate him with something positive globally. He's always wanted to go global, and if I was Rishi Sunak, I'd be worried that maybe Boris' interest in a parliamentary seat where you have to account for your expenses and account for your earnings outside Parliament, then maybe he'll have a by-election. A by-election in Uxbridge would be a straight Labour gain with polls the way they are at the moment. But Boris definitely going to cash in on his relationship with Zelensky.
But he will also, John, I mean, he's going to make a lot of money anyway because he's going on the international lecture circuit and he'll get a lot of money. If Theresa May can earn £100,000, I'd pay £100,000 not to listen to Theresa May make a speech. He will get double that at least. But this Ukraine project will enhance his reputation as an international statesman.
All former prime ministers in recent years have got decades ahead of them of public service, public life. And this is a very good thing to do. And since Bill Clinton set up his first foundation, everybody's thought about foundations. And so, you know, if Boris Johnson's foundation is anything like as successful as Tony Blair's, then it'll be a great post-political career.
Indeed. Liz, you're in the Telegraph. Radio. Lots of us are listening to the radio, especially this radio.
Well, as somebody who started my first radio show 41 years ago in Leeds, I am a massive fan of radio, and I'm always a bit of an anorak when the quarterly listening figures come out. And if you looked today at the BBC News website, you'd think that everything was rosy, but it's, sorry, not meaning you, but looking at the actual radar figures, that's the body that carries out the research across all radio. So the headlines for you. GB News, the only news and current affairs focused station to see growth. Up from Q1, which was ending March, and it was 239,000 listeners. It's now 438,000, nearly double, and moving in the right direction, as us DJs say. The biggest falls in the news sector, BBC World Service. That's tragic because it's so important at the moment in the current global climate. 14.6% down. LBC is down in London. and across the whole UK by 15%.
That's a big drop.
Yeah.
I used to work there.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to shed any tears.
Yeah, you've jumped ship to someone that's not
I have,
sinking.
yeah.
Talk radio's down 7%, Times radio's down 5%, and Radio 4's down just under 5%. So it's against the trend. GB News is bucking the trend. Now, it's still the smallest news station, but it is the only one that's growing.
Do you think that says anything about radio habits as a whole rather than about specific stations?
As a whole, radio's very healthy. It's still... video did not kill the radio star. People still want radio. It's portable, it's kind of passive, it's personal, and yet it's makes you part of a community at the same time. All predictions about that. No, radio... The thing is that BBC's losing it and commercial stations are gaining. For instance, my old station... which retired me in March this year, it's now losing out to Absolute Radio, which I'm an absolute fan of, Absolute Radio. And Six Music's lost 14% of its audience.
Because they lost you.
Well, my colleagues there work really hard. But as with all the music radio stations, 1, 2, 3, if you start social engineering rather than, keeping what's working, I know things have to change, then this is like we were talking about earlier with the J.K. Rowling books. People vote with their feet, or in this case, their ears or eyes. So Radio Scotland, again, it's like, I don't hear it, but people tell me and I see it on Twitter and such all the time. Radio Scotland is like a permanent party political broadcast for Nicola Sturgeon. Listening, 20% down in a year. Radio London, 31% down. Just a quick cheer for my BBC local radio colleagues. Across the country, there are 39, I think it is, BBC local radio stations, and the people there have been treated abominably since the beginning of COVID and lockdowns, and people are now having to do 4-hour shows for the same wages as 2-hour shows. They haven't had a pay rise for years. And it's grown slightly by 2% to 7.3 million. But I can remember when local radio, in 2005, when I was doing the breakfast show on a local radio, there were 15 million people listening to BBC local radio. So that's moving downwards. Anyway, well done to everybody, especially, as Rosie pointed out earlier, this show, which has the biggest radio audience.
Well, that's thank you to people who are listening at home. And if that's you this morning, don't switch off. We've got lots to come in the next hour or so left of breakfast. Let's talk in the Sun now, John. Page 6, Adele, taking up education.
Yes, she says she's going to pause her Las Vegas residency so she can study for an English degree. And I think that is brilliant, partly because I've got an English degree, and it's nice to see people wanting to devote themselves to something I spent 3 years of my life studying, 4 years of my life in Scotland, actually. And it's great to see a love of education, the love of learning. It's one of the front pages we discussed today is about how skills and education are going to get the economy going again. And this is, a great influencer and a great influence from Adele saying she wants to take up English literature and read it, study it, and get herself a degree. And I think that is... And
is she going to go to a university, or is she going to do it from home or something?
She's going to be doing it online, so she's going to be trying to wrap it into her home life as well. She's not going to go to a campus somewhere. I imagine she'll still keep her recording career up in alongside this.
She's a great woman.
She's a great woman.
Should we move to the Telegraph? Liz, we've got a royal story here. Avoiding a headache. What is it?
Yeah, well, Prince, excuse me.
He's the king.
Yeah, Your Majesty. King Charles is about to go on a tour. In fact, they're all going out on tours to whip up support around the world. And it's rare that the King and the Prince of Wales would be abroad at the same time. When they are abroad, then there's got to be kind of standing on hold. And it struck Parliament, questions were asked of the day, and also the King, that this could be Andrew, Prince Andrew, or Prince Harry, who doesn't even live here anymore and is not a senior royal, but they're still on the list. So they're quickly going to introduce a new bill so that they're basically fired. And my heroine, Princess Anne, she's so... I love that woman, so ballsy and hard-working, no nonsense. And she's going to be... She was on the list, but then she got usurped by William, I think it was. She's been in and out, but she's back. And also Prince Edward, who's another one of the Queen's children who's not actually been in court.
They don't know what to do with Prince Andrew. I think they should move him to a nice farm on the Balmoral estate so we don't have to see him anymore, because he's been retired from public life because he paid £12 million of his money to a woman he says he doesn't think he ever met. Odd that.
Prince Andrew clearly loves horses, horse riding, and he should go and devote himself to a life, really, of that, looking after a farm, looking after horses, retire from public life, and maybe even retire and become the artist formerly known as Prince.
I think the best advice I was ever given when I started out working was, it's not who you are, it's what you do. And he should take that on board and just say, right, I've had that role, I'm now, what is he, 63 in November? I'm just going to enjoy things. You know, I don't have to be a celebrity royal. I'll still go mad. You know, he'll just go mad. If you can't accept.
And Harry's chosen his life. He's not a royal. He doesn't want to be a royal anymore, except he uses his title when it suits him.
Yeah.
When he wants to make some money.
It's always dangerous ground when we get onto the royals here.
Harry and Meghan were a great addition to the royal family, and it's sad to see them excluded. I think
it's their own decision.
Meghan sends the same message to the world that Rishi Sunak, being a South Asian heritage, being a Prime Minister, this is a very open and tolerant country, and I'd rather have Meghan and Harry in and around the royal family showing, you know, a little bit of difference, a little bit, but a lot of diversity, and that's what we need.
I think we need the diversity and the harmony. That would be better for everybody.
And there won't be any harmony when his book comes out, Kissing and Telling About the Royals, or the documentary from Netflix, which is coming out in a few weeks' time. That'll go down well.
It's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind that what happened to his mum was traumatic.
Yeah, it was for William too.
And I think that he sees a lot of the world and a lot of his relationships through that prism. And the honesty sometimes he has about talking about his own emotions. As a man, you have to kind of think, actually, a lot of men would be a lot better if they talked more about themselves and their partners in the way that he does.
I think the royal family will have achieved true diversity when they have somebody called Princess Tracy, who talks like me, or Princess Charlene, who talks with a Brummie accent. Because if you're white and working class, you're still not going to be married to a royal.
Liz, John, thank you very much, both of you, for taking us through the papers this morning. Lots more to come, though, here on Breakfast. It's coming up to 10 to 9. Let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines today.
Vladimir Putin has overseen annual exercises by Russia's strategic nuclear forces. This is at a time of heightened tensions with the West over the 8-month-long war in Ukraine. The Kremlin says it involves ballistic and cruise missiles being launched from the Arctic to Russia's Far East.
Crunch talks are taking place in Northern Ireland today in an attempt to avoid another Assembly election. Now, under the current system, unless a power-sharing executive is formed before Friday the 28th of October, that's tomorrow, the parties will once again be forced to go to the ballot box. Around 350,000 health workers, including nurses, cleaners and paramedics, will vote today on whether to strike over pay. Unison members from more than 250 health trusts across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are being balloted. The union's calling on the government to up the £1,400 pay rise given in the summer, saying health workers are leaving for better paid jobs.
Now, we've been discussing this all morning and we've been asking you for your opinion. Is the idea of a ladies' night sexist or old-fashioned?
Now, there's one pub in Surrey that's been hosting its weekly event continuously for the past 12 years. It's been giving women half-price drinks if they attend. Now, the pub's been accused of discriminating against men, bringing ladies' night to an end.
The owner of the Star Inn, Simon Skinner, and he joins us now. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning.
Why have you given in? Why have you given in to the woke brigade?
So we were giving 50% off for food for ladies every Monday night. I've been doing this offer for 26 years in various places, 12 years at the Star. And It's the first complaint we've ever had, and it was a fair complaint, really. I don't think we can really carry on with something that is sexist. I know it's only one person, but it's drawn it into question now, so we don't really have any choice.
So what happened? How did you get the complaint, and what exactly did they say?
Well, my manager, Kasha, actually phoned me on Monday night to say that a gentleman was wanting 50% discount. And I said, well, we don't do that. And she said, I've never had this situation before. What should we do? And I said, just charge him full price. And it was only afterwards that I got the comments back from him to say that it was sex discrimination, that he was going to take it further. And I really felt obliged to sort of to end the offer, really, and make it more open for everyone.
What do the ladies, or women, as I should call them, what do they think about the fact you're ending this, Simon? Because clearly it's been very, very popular.
Yeah, the ladies, I mean, it's only ever really been a ladies' dining club. It's not been anything more than that. So we haven't excluded men. We get about sort of 20% men. We probably have about 30 out of 50. 30 out of 150 every Monday will be men. So it's not a ladies-only event. But the ladies have been a little bit upset, and the men have been upset as well. I think they quite enjoy sometimes having a Monday night at home, which they feel they probably won't have on their own anymore.
You can understand, though, why, and well, I think you have understood why the men are saying, well, why am I paying twice as much as my friend or my other half who's come here and got it for half price?
Absolutely, absolutely. They have a fair point. It's just the fact that no men have ever said that before. They occasionally joke to say, when are we going to have a lads' night? And when I say, OK, we'll have a Tuesday night where you can all get together and sit around the table and talk with your friends, they kind of back off from that quite quickly. So they're not really worried about it. They're pragmatic. I think they take it as a bit of fun. It's really not an issue for most men. They're quite happy with it.
Simon, what's this going to do to your business on Ladies' Night? Are you going to... Is business down now?
We don't know. He's frozen.
We're frozen.
Hopeless.
Well, we're fully booked again for this Monday. And moving forward, we're doing 25% off for ladies and 25% off for men from all Mondays moving forward. So it's still going to be a great night. We're still calling it Ladies' Night, but men will also get a 25% discount as well.
Can we just ask you, just more generally, we often get really a gloomy picture of what's happening to hospitality, and we know that people have got far less, if in fact sometimes none, disposable income to spend. How are things turning over? This has obviously been some kind of great PR for you guys, and people, I'm sure, more talking about your pub than they would have done. But just financially, are things adding up?
Things are going to get a lot worse, obviously. People, I think, haven't probably put their heating on yet. I've not put mine on at home, and I know a lot of people haven't. So the rising heating costs is kind of theoretical at the moment. That's really going to bite. Obviously, we're kind of in a perfect storm. It's not just hospitality this time around, of course. It's anyone who runs a business can see their costs sometimes outweighing their profits. We're quite lucky here. We are in a good spot. We've got a big pub. Like I said, I've been here 12 years. We're quite established. So we're hoping we'll weather the storm. But it's going to be tough for everyone, I think.
Simon, thank you so much for your time. Simon Skinner is the owner of the Star Inn, who have, sort of calibrated what Ladies' Night looks like. And it's a night for everyone now, 25% off on a Monday. Really appreciate your time, Simon.
Thank you.
We've been asking you on our Twitter poll to vote. Are Ladies' Night sexist? Well, almost 3,000 votes have been cast this morning. 72% of you say no. 27 say yes.
Hooray. That's turned around. The voice of common sense is the voice of GB News listeners and viewers.
Yeah, lots of you have been getting in touch. Paul says, I'd like equality for men and have a gentleman's 50% night. If not, promoting one gender over the other is sexist.
Oh, come on.
You could do Mondays for ladies, Tuesdays for men.
Look, it was a nice night out for the women, away from the men, and they just have a nice time. Next thing we're going to say, hen nights are sexist. Are they sexist? A stag night sexist? They're male? They're female? Where do we go with this? Well, it's similar.
It's the same,
just the
but
thought
similar.
police will be coming after it. Simon should have stuck to his guns.
Yeah, he said one complaint.
One complaint
and he
in 12 years,
mind.
and he changed his mind. He should have stuck to his guns.
I think it was the fact that the person said they'd take the complaint further. What does that mean?
Well, they're probably going to go to some boring lawyer and sue for, what, sex discrimination or something?
No sympathy
Would have been a
over
great
here.
story. It would have been a great story, actually.
It's coming up to 9 o'clock. Please keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't miss this. After the break, we're speaking to one of the newly appointed members of Rishi Sunak's cabinet, Nadeem Zahawi. That's in a second.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank and, of course, fun every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Rishi Sunak delays his crucial fiscal statement amid fears he could abandon the pensions triple lock altogether.
A very good morning. Welcome to Breakfast on GB News. It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 27th of October. This morning with Andrew Pearce and Rosie Wright. Just half an hour to go, Andrew.
I've survived.
It's been brilliant.
I hope the viewers and the listeners have.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The Treasury has announced the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal statement is being delayed by more than 2 weeks, fuelling concerns that Rishi Sunak is going to abandon that pensions triple lock. We're going to be asking the Conservative Party chairman, Nadhim Zahawi, for his thoughts.
Well, it comes as the Prime Minister uses his first full day in office to dismantle what was left of Liz Truss's legacy, reinstating the fracking ban she lifted.
And dispelling the stigma of HIV will be the former rugby star Gareth Thomas, who tells us about feeling personally victimised, plus he'll explain why he won't be travelling to Qatar to support Wales in the upcoming Football World Cup.
Now, please get in touch in the usual way. You know the email address, gbviews@gbnews.uk, particularly if you've got a burning question potentially over pensions for Nadhim Zahawi. Get it in now, or you can tweet us too @GBNews.
But to our top... To our top story now, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has delayed the Chancellor's much-anticipated fiscal announcement by more than 2 weeks, with the Treasury confirming it will now be a full autumn statement.
Well, it's amid speculation that the Prime Minister may abandon the pensions triple lock. That was, of course, a Conservative manifesto pledge, as well as the pledge to raise benefits in line with inflation.
Well, this was Rishi Sunak speaking at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday when he said he would be honest about the economy.
That is the difference between him and me. This summer, I was being honest about the difficulties that we were facing. But when he ran for leader, he promised his party he would borrow billions and billions of pounds. I told the truth for the good of the country. He told his party what it wanted to hear. Leadership is not selling fairy tales. It is confronting challenges, and that is the leadership the British people will get from this government.
Well, let's get more from our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's live outside Downing Street for us this morning. A very good morning to you, Darren. We got a sense yesterday, didn't we? It was changing our minds on fracking and a big question mark over pensions.
Yeah, indeed, very strange all of this, though, because essentially what we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday, and indeed the Prime Minister's spokesperson, was that this is a government that's going to be committed to that 2019 manifesto. Now, why is that? Well, clearly, Rishi Sunak's argument around legitimacy, the reason that he can legitimately and authoritatively stay inside number 10 is because it was the Conservative Party that won the 2019 election, not just Boris Johnson. And as part of that Conservative Party, he's got a right to be in there, given the fact that he is most popular amongst Conservative MPs. But the problem is that actually when you look at some of the details, it's not entirely clear they are going to implement all of that 2019 manifesto. So fracking, banning fracking, now that is in the manifesto, so tick to them on that. But yesterday I was probing the Prime Minister's spokesperson on this idea about triple lock pensions and why they would not guarantee that. It is in the Conservative Party manifesto, and they wouldn't go as far as to say that that is off the table. And we've been all over the place when it comes to the triple lock pension. Initially, Liz Truss said it was safe, then it wasn't safe, then it was safe. Now it doesn't seem safe again. It's no wonder people are worried and concerned. And so I think it is this really, really interesting thing where they're trying to say, yes, we're going to hold to what we said a couple of years ago, the reason that you voted for us. But in the end, everything will depend on the public finances. Everything will depend on what is possible during that autumn statement on November 17th. And all this, of course, while the government is having to deal with trying to put out some fires this morning, first of all with Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, and whether she's got security clearance and was the right person for that job as Home Secretary, have been reappointed less than a week after essentially she was sacked for breaking the ministerial code. Jake Berry, who was up until a couple of days ago chairman of the Conservative Party, suggesting that she had broken the ministerial code, that there had been several breakings of that code, and that Sir Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary, had made it clear that she needed to go, and he didn't think his view would have changed before the reappointment. So the government is still going to face questions, particularly from Labour, on that. And then if you look at the front page of the Daily Mail today and many other newspapers, it is clear that the government again are going to get an awful lot of pressure on this issue of the English small boats crisis, costing £7 million a day, thousands, records of numbers of people arriving, particularly from Albania now, and there is no real sense that the government have got a grip on this, or indeed, frankly, any idea of how to get a grip on this. And I suspect this is a story that really is going to mount in the days and weeks to come.
Darren, thank you very much, live there for us from Downing Street. Well, let's get the reactions now from our GB News economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, who is on the money. Joined by the former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker. Thank you very much for coming in, and Norman too. Liam, let's just start with you, because one of the big things, and we predicted it this time yesterday, that fiscal statement was going to be delayed. It looks as though Rishi Sunak has bought himself some time.
Indeed. Just wanted to start by welcoming my old chum, Andrew Pearce, to the GB News family finally.
Thank you.
He's going to do fantastically well, as viewers and listeners can already see. Interesting thing happened yesterday. I've got this statement from the OBR, which you can see now, if we can put it up on the screen for GB News viewers, but I'll read out anyway, of course. The Office for Budget Responsibility had our forecast been published on October the 31st, which, of course, was the plan, that Halloween statement. It would have been based on market determinants, including for gas prices and gilt yields, from the early to middle part of October. Postponing the date to November the 17th means that we will take a later window for these market prices. What does that gobbledygook mean in English? What it means, Rosie, is that because gas prices are coming down, because borrowing costs for the government are coming down, they've come down extremely sharply since before last weekend, when it looked as if there'd still be a fractious fight at the top of the Conservative Party for number 10. They've come down from 4.1%, 4.2%. That's the amount the government must pay every year to borrow money for 10 years, down to 3.5%, 3.6%. That's a huge reduction, half a percentage point for an advanced, big industrial economy like the UK. This sort of thing usually happens in sort of, small Latin American countries, these big market movements. If the government is spending a lot less money on debt interest, tens of billions of pounds more at these kind of levels, and if gas prices are lower and they're falling, that completely changes the public finances, because that energy price cap's cheaper to deliver, and we spend less money on debt interest, and that could give Rishi Sunak a bit more room for manoeuvre.
And without being too technical, Liam, why has that interest rate fallen so sharply?
It's a combination of global factors, Andrew. US house prices are rising less fast than they previously were. So the US economy looks as if it's slowing down. The dollar weakens, the pound gets a bit stronger. It makes government bonds more attractive if you're buying them in pounds, but also because, not the end, but certainly a calming down of the fractious Conservative politics, and frankly, Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt at number 11 ditching or looking to ditch some of these really expensive fiscal policies. And one of those, and it is a 2019 manifesto commitment, maybe the triple lock. The triple lock, of course, is that the basic state pension received by 11 million UK pensioners is uprated every year, either by 2.5% or the average rate of average earnings increase, or by the rate of inflation. Of course, the rate of inflation now is 10.1%. Uprating the basic state pension by 10.1%, and then, of course, that increase lasts forever. You can't then reduce it next year. Is a huge fiscal commitment. It may be, the Tories are calculating, a lot of those 11 million pensioners will vote Tory anyway, and it may be better in terms of the taxpayer getting bang for their buck to target additional help to particularly vulnerable pensioners on things like heating, on things like immobility, sickness, other vulnerabilities, rather than a 10.1% increase across the board for some pensioners, just some, who don't actually need the money.
We're going to try and get clarity from Nadeem Zahawi on pensions. He's coming on the programme in about 5 minutes' time. In the meantime, Norman, in the studio with us. Rishi Sunak, first time at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday. He said difficult decisions to come. We got a glimpse yesterday of what they were going to be.
Yes, he's lining up his MPs for some unpleasant medicine, I think, on the 17th of next month. He's right, I think, to delay the fiscal statement. I mean, the idea that he comes into Prime Ministerial office and then within a matter of days has to have a major statement is not sensible. So taking time with Jeremy Hunt to prepare this properly is a sensible idea. I have to say that, picking up on Liam's point about the triple lock, I find it pretty indefensible. You can give pensioners over 10% increase. People who, in some cases, are very, very well off indeed. There are poor pensioners who need to be helped, but there are plenty of pensioners who don't need help. There are people in the south of Spain who are getting winter fuel allowance still from this government. That cannot be right in any shape or form. If there are difficult decisions to be made, let's make them fairly. And what we've seen over the last 10, 20 years, actually, has been helping pensioners at the expense sometimes of younger people in particular, because pensioners vote, they tend to vote Conservative. Now, you know, I've got a daughter and other people have got children. This generation coming through is going to be the first generation which is going to be poorer than their parents. That cannot be right. So we need to have a recalculation as to who's going to bear the brunt of this. The other news this morning was that Shell come up with record profits again for this quarter. I think it was 26 billion or something absolutely enormous. You know, why is there no proper windfall tax on the oil companies to try and help with the public finances in that way? Why is non-dom status not being closed down, that loophole? You know, there are avenues open to the Prime Minister to get public finances back on an even footing without penalising ordinary people.
Don't they say, Liam, that having non-doms here brings in more money than if you brought in a policy to ban non-doms?
They do. That's been the Treasury's argument and successive governments' arguments, mainly Conservative governments, for many, many years.
The Blair Brown government never got rid of it.
They talked about a lot about it before they were first in power, and then when they got into office and saw the actual numbers, they didn't. We'll have to see, won't we? Of course, there's an extra layer of sensitivity here because of the new Prime Minister's wife was a non-dom, and then she wasn't breaking any laws. She was paying all tax due in the UK, but of course she wasn't paying tax on her worldwide income, which meant she could, you know, award herself dividends in different countries and so on. Just going back to the triple lock point, isn't it interesting? Here we got Norman Baker, former Lib Dem minister, compassionate guy, if I may say so. I think the times are changing in terms of that basic state pension. Of course we've got pensioner poverty in this country. Of course we have. But it may make more sense to move away from that cherished Beveridge principle of a universal benefit for all pensioners and move to more targeted help, maybe targeted by council tax bans or other characteristics. Targeting, or means testing as we call it, is always very, very difficult. There are hard cases that fall either side of the line, but it does seem pretty indefensible to spend so much money when hard-working families won't be getting pay rises anywhere near 10%. Yeah. Some of them may not get any pay rises at all, but he is breaking a 2019 manifesto pledge if he does move away from the triple lock. And that is, he says, you know, his mandate is that 2019 manifesto. I think that's why on the same day, in the last sort of 12, 24 hours, we've seen a determination to maintain the ban on fracking, which was a 2019 manifesto pledge, at the same time as moving away from another 29 manifesto pledge so they could sort of leaven the mix.
Liam, thank you very much. And Norman, do stay right there. We are joined now by the new Conservative Party chair, Nadhim Zahawi. A very good morning to you. We've just been talking about your manifesto pledges in 2019. Tell us why you've decided to change the commitments made by Liz Truss on fracking to recommit to that pledge in 2019.
Well, I think Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, quite rightly decided that the 2019 manifesto was the manifesto that delivered that mandate for us, and that we need to focus on that manifesto, because when in 24 months' time, if we've delivered against it, we go to the country, we're able to say, this is the manifesto you elected us on, look at our track record in delivery. What he said on fracking, and I don't know whether you know this, but I'm a chemical engineer by background. You know, we have some fantastic assets in the North Sea, which we are incentivizing companies to continue to invest in. This year, actually, production is up by about 26% from the North Sea, and that the technology on fracking, if it becomes improved and if it's seen to be safe and communities want it, then, of course, we revisit that moratorium. But at the moment, the focus has to be on delivering the 2019 manifesto.
Zahawi, it's very important to deliver on the 2019 manifesto, hence the fracking ban will continue. Why is it then that the Prime Minister appears to be junking a very important part of that manifesto, the triple lock?
Well, the Prime Minister yesterday, I think, also explained the tough decisions ahead. Andrew, you know this. We've got war on our continent. In 2019, we didn't have war on our continent. We have had a extraordinary pandemic that we had to deal with. In 2019, of course, we didn't have that. What the Prime Minister did say is that these are going to be tough decisions, but also he will always make sure that those that are most vulnerable are put first. They are the ones that we focus on that are protected. He was the Chancellor of the Exchequer who effectively delivered that £1,200 for the most vulnerable 8 million households in our country when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he'll continue to prioritise the most vulnerable. And I think I'm stating the obvious here, but pensioners don't have the luxury of being able to take on work and more hours to augment their pension, to add to their income. And he'll be conscious of that, as will the Chancellor. What he won't do is preempt the autumn statement. I think that's only right. Andrew, you've been around politics for long enough to know that's how governments do things. We have an autumn statement, we have budgets, and that's what we wait to hear from the Chancellor. There's not going to be easy decisions. As I said, there's war on our continent. The inflation is high, not just in our country, but in Europe.
Mr. Zahawi, with respect, you can't come on the programme and say how important the manifesto is, which is why you're going to continue with the fracking ban, and then junk a major part of it, which affects 11 million people. The manifesto is sacrosanct, or it isn't.
When no one's junked anything, all I'm saying to you is I'm not going to preempt it, Andrew. I know you are a very, very clever journalist, and you're sort of trying to get me to make a commitment, a fiscal commitment, when we have an autumn statement. What I'm saying to you is wait until the autumn statement, and I will happily come back on your show, and congratulations on your debut presenting today, Andrew. I will happily come back on your programme and then discuss the autumn statement in detail, but let's wait and see what happens on the 17th of November.
Let's talk about things you are happy to do, because what you and other of your colleagues have been put into a position now where you've got to defend, and we've had this before in Boris Johnson's government, some unusual appointments. Why is it that Suella Braverman is back in the cabinet when there are concerns that there were multiple breaches of security rules? Are you frustrated to have to defend claims like that again?
Right, let's just look at what happened with Suella Braverman. When Suella Braverman was the Home Secretary under the previous administration, if you look at her letter that she wrote, when she said in her letter, I made a mistake, I'm not going to brush it under the carpet, I'm not going to try and hang on to my job, I will resign immediately. That's what she did. This Prime Minister, and he dealt with this yesterday in some detail, said that I will look at the detail. He looked at the detail of what happened, and he felt that Suella was deserving of that second chance. And I hope both of you agree with me that people deserve a second chance, and redemption is a good thing. Suella is a very talented Home Secretary. She's got a massive in-trade to deal with, not least with the small boats issue where people are being exploited, their lives being put in danger. We've seen the numbers rise this year. We have a burning platform to deal with. I was very much part of that team when I was Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, dealing with that almost on a daily basis to put a plan in place to fix that issue, which is really, really difficult. It's almost at £6 million a day in cost at the moment, and we have to fix it and fix it sustainably, as the Prime Minister said yesterday. But Suella, I think, is deserving of a second chance. I guess the big difference is, in the old world, governments didn't change so rapidly. It would take years before you get a new administration, and people would be out and then come back in with a second chance. Politics now moves at breakneck speed, as I discovered this weekend. Life comes at you fast.
Can I just ask you on migrants? 38,000 so far have crossed the Channel. That's the equivalent of a small town, putting huge pressure on local services in Kent and surrounding areas. When are you finally going to get to grips with this? Because, Minister, you did say Brexit would mean getting control of our borders. You've lost control completely.
So we've got the points-based system that actually has given us real control over our borders and who we have. And you look at what we're doing with the 50 best universities in the world, where we bring the talent from those countries. You look at what we're doing on, the highly skilled labour that we need in our country. The illegal migration, these small boats, these gangs, we have to deal with. That 38,000 you speak about, Andrew, 80% of that spike this year is from Albania. And they're using, as Suella spoke about at the party conference, that brilliant speech she gave, they're using, or abusing, I should say, they're not using, they're abusing the Modern Slavery Act to use that loophole to actually put their life in danger, come to this country, and then use that or abuse that loophole. We're going to close that as well as doing that. There's a number of work streams that she is focused on. That's one of them. Operationalizing the Rwanda scheme is another one. Working with our French counterparts on patrols and making sure that we do more work together with Albania to say to the Albanian government that we need to deal with this at source. There's a number of work streams that we're working at rapidly. And I know that she's focused on that, as is the Prime Minister. There are no easy answers, but we are determined to fix this. And I think it's right that the Prime Minister has put the right person in place in Suella Braverman.
Nadeem Zahawi, thank you very much for your time, and apologies everyone for the connection on the line, but very much worth persevering with. Really appreciate it. Now, it's 20 minutes past 9. We've got a very special interview now. Joining us is the Welsh rugby legend, Gareth Thomas. Gareth bravely revealed his HIV diagnosis in 2019 before embarking then on a mission to raise awareness around the virus. Well, thank you very much for coming. We know you've been tirelessly campaigning. Just explain to us how that's taken its shape.
So we're campaigning around the stigma around the virus, because we work closely with Terence Higgins Trust and ViV Healthcare, who are kind of one of the leaders in the medicine and science around HIV. And what I realised was that science and medicine has been so advanced that HIV is not a death sentence anymore. But the language used, sometimes the media coverage, the perception of people by so many, you wouldn't think that that is the case. So stigma, actually, UNAIDS brought a figure out to say that stigma, over the next 20 years, HIV-related stigma will kill 400,000 people. Like, that's quite alarming. So
how does it kill them?
Well, people refusing to go for tests because of the stigma around that, people not wanting to be seen to be doing tests, people not wanting to take their medication, suicide. There's so many different elements to stigma because of people's misinformation or people's understanding that creates the stigma. So what we kind of on at the moment is, I learned from doing campaigning, it's really easy, right, to sit in front of a room full of people who understand and get a standing ovation and told what you're doing is brilliant. But that's not enough. I think when you're campaigning around stigma to understand, for everybody to understand, you have to go to uncomfortable places. So we've got a bus, and we're taking the bus on a tour to venues and to areas where you wouldn't think people would have this conversation or feel like they need to have this conversation. And it's to understand that this is not a virus that is purely a characteristical virus that only affects gay and bisexual men or black African men and women, which most people think. In England in 2020, for the first time in a decade, there were more new cases of HIV among heterosexual people than there were amongst gay and bisexual men. And globally, 54% of the people living with the virus are female. So busting one of them myths, one of them stigmas, is to get people to understand that this virus can and does affect anyone. So what I'm saying and what I'm doing is not just for me and for the LGBT community to live a happy, healthier life. It's for everyone to understand that if you're sexually active, the potential is you are at risk of this virus, and breaking down them stigmas then that people feel, because that stigma then acts as a barrier to people getting tested.
So you're encouraging people to practice safe sex?
I'm encouraging people to get tested.
Right.
To know what they...
But shouldn't you encourage them to have safe sex?
Yeah, of course I should. But the reality is as well, mind, for somebody like me, who's married, is my husband is HIV negative. And because science and medicine has come so far, I take one tablet a day, and that suppresses the virus in my body, which means that the virus becomes undetectable in my body, which means I cannot transmit it through unsafe sex. There's other STIs that could be transmitted, but as I'm married, my husband lives, and his family also lives, knowing that that virus is unable to be transferred between us. So as much as it's about practicing safe sex, it's about knowing your status, because in England, I'm part of a select committee that wants to make England the first country in the world to have 0 new cases of HIV by 2030. And the only way of doing that is for everybody to know their status, everybody to get tested.
Let's talk about the looming World Cup in Qatar, and there's been lots, people concerned about the LGBTQ+ community and their safety. What are your thoughts about where the World Cup's being hosted and how safe everybody might be in going to attend?
Well, listen, I felt when it was named, especially after the last World Cup being held in Russia, which again isn't illegal to be gay, but is very much frowned upon. I just felt, again, there's the powerful, with power comes great corruption. And I felt it was a very corrupt decision to hold it there. And, I would never go and support it because I'd feel like they'd want me to be respectful of their culture. But where's their respect then and open up the gates to the world? Where's their respect to the culture of the world, of the diversity of the world, to welcome them in? And I've also thought that, being a professional sports person myself, any major sporting event should, and usually almost does, always have some kind of legacy. So this sporting event will take place, and this is the great legacy we will leave after. Now, sadly, pre this event, everyone is always talking about the disgusting human rights in this country and their views against LGBT people. But nobody's ever once said to them, what is the legacy of this event? What legacy do you expect to leave behind it? Because I can't see a positive legacy coming from something that is going to be, one of, if not the most watched event globally. And people say sport should have representation within society, or society should have some kind of, representation within sport. I can't see a match on this.
What do you make of David Beckham, who's effectively an ambassador for these games and for Qatar, earning millions of pounds promoting this country?
Yeah, I find it difficult to understand why somebody would not just promote it. It's up to him if he wants to promote it. That's his reason to deal with. But actually, I think to promote it, but not to address the other issue. Because I think the sad thing about this is there is always two issues here. It's not just always about the sport. It's about the sport and the legacy, about the sport and this controversy. And I think if you address one issue, you have to be willing to address or make a stance on the other issue. And I think, feel for me, it's quite, it says a lot that nothing has been done on the other side of this issue. We have to look at it at two sides here.
Thank you very much for coming in and talking to us, Gareth Thomas. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well done on today's show.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That is pretty much it from us. How's it been?
Well, I've loved it. I hope people watching and listening have loved it too.
Absolutely have. And you will be back
next Thursday. And then the following day, Friday, will be my first show on my own. You won't be there to hold my hand, Rosie.
I won't, but it's been a pleasure. Don't go anywhere. Stick with GB News. Tom Howell will be up next with a briefing, and Stephen and Anne will be here tomorrow from 6 a.m. for breakfast. See you then.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and a